Chapter 2571. What do you mean? Wu Dingzi's expression turned cold as he looked at Jun Dingtian. It seemed like he would not let this matter rest until Jun Dingtian gave him an explanation. Are you talking about Gu Shiring? What's there to be afraid of? At most, he's on par with me. No matter how powerful he is, he won't be able to do anything if we join forces. Although he has joined forces with Yin Bai's strength is still far from mine. He's nothing to worry about. Wu Dingzi analyzed. Then, have you heard that he has joined forces with Yi Shiwen's? Jun Dingtian said, glancing at Wu Dingzi. Wu Dingzi's expression suddenly changed. He thought of the many legends about Yi Shiwen. Whether they were willing or not, Yi Shiwen's reputation as the number one of the current generation had been around for a long time. As the saying goes, those who are famous are worthy of their reputation. Although Yi Shiwen might not be the number one in the world for so many years, no one would believe that he didn't have a few tricks up his sleeve. He wasn't afraid of Gu Shiring at all. Even if Yin Bai was added, he wouldn't be afraid. Not to mention that he had Jun Dingtian as his ally. Even without him, he had nothing to be afraid of. But if Yi Shiwen was added to the mix, then the situation would be completely different. Yi Shiwen had been famous for a long time, but that was hundreds of years ago. No one knew what level he had cultivated to now. He had killed someone at the pinnacle of the Sage Plane hundreds of years ago, and he was probably even stronger now, regardless of whether he had used tricks or not. Unless, as the rumors said, he was seriously injured and unable to exert his full strength. So, what if it's Yi Shiwen? Although he killed a peak of the Divine Lord hundreds of years ago, he did so with the help of a peerless sword. His own strength is nothing. Wu Dingzi's expression was uncertain because he couldn't be completely sure. How can the situation be the same hundreds of years ago and now? But to me, it's nothing. It's just a child's play. Wu Dingzi immediately regained his confidence. Indeed, Yi Shiwen's performance hundreds of years ago was eye-catching, outshining others and dominating the world. But now, hundreds of years had passed, and everyone was working hard. It could be said that 100 flowers were blooming. It was definitely not the same as hundreds of years ago when he was dominating the world. If you don't take him seriously, the two of us will die in his hands sooner or later. Jun Dingtian said, I've been fighting with him for so many years, but I can't do anything to him. It's said that he suffered heavy losses in the battle hundreds of years ago, but that's not the case. He just hides his strength well. Just a few years ago, he destroyed one of my strongholds. The people I left there were no match for him at all. Even an old senior of our hidden valley was defeated by him. According to the information I received, even if he hasn't reached our realm, I'm afraid that his combat strength is similar to ours. Impossible! Wu Dingzi was in disbelief. He had mixed feelings in his heart. It seemed like he could believe it. After all, a person's name was like a tree's shadow. However, he wasn't willing to believe it. That was because Yi Shiwen's cultivation time was only a fraction of his. In fact, Yi Shiwen had only cultivated for a few thousand years. However, Yi Shiwen had cultivated for 70,000 to 80,000 years. He had accumulated a lot of experience, but he had only reached this realm. Although Jun Dingtian's cultivation time was shorter than his, it was still incomparable to Yi Shiwen's cultivation time. It's not impossible. I've fought with him many times, but I never gained the upper hand. I know this person very well. He's very difficult to deal with, Jun Dingtian said confidently. He had fought with Yi Shiwen several times, but the result couldn't be described as not gaining the upper hand. It was a bitter history of blood and tears. Except for the first time, when he used his profound martial power to oppress Yi Shiwen, he didn't gain the upper hand at all after that. Even the first time, he didn't manage to defeat Yi Shiwen and was scared away by him. Such an opponent could be said to be unforgettable. He had a deep impression of Yi Shiwen. Even if everyone looked down on Yi Shiwen, he would not look down on Yi Shiwen. Otherwise, how could he be considered as someone who had suffered losses in Yi Shiwen's hands? Even so, we don't have to be afraid of them if we join forces, Wu Dingzi said calmly. Even if we join forces, we still don't have a 100% chance of winning. It's better to find another one, Jun Dingtian said. There's no need for that. Just the two of us are enough. Wu Dingzi immediately refused. He was very clear that if he were to find another one, his share would undoubtedly be much smaller. Jun Dingtian immediately guessed what Wu Dingzi was thinking and said, I don't need my share, and your share will not decrease. You don't have to worry about this. You don't want it? Then what are you working so hard for? Wu Dingzi immediately became suspicious. Weren't they so busy just for the riches inside? Because I want to kill Yi Shiwen. This time, I want to kill him completely, so that he can no longer threaten me. Jun Dingtian said coldly. Wu Dingzi suddenly remembered that Jun Dingtian had been defeated by Yi Shiwen in the intelligence. Was it because of this that he wanted to kill Yi Shiwen? If that was the case, it was normal. People like them had always been invincible. However, once they were defeated by someone of the same generation, it would leave a shadow in their heart. If they were not careful, it would form a demon in their heart. By then, not only would they not be able to improve, but they would also become weaker. He thought that he had completely grasped Jun Dingtian's thoughts, but he didn't know that Jun Dingtian didn't think so at all. In Jun Dingtian's eyes, he was a person who was about to become a matchless king again. Yi Shiwen was nothing to him. He was the reincarnation of an invincible king. He didn't care about these so-called geniuses at all. In this generation, there were only a few who could enter the king realm. Yi Shiwen was only one of his targets. However, this wasn't the fundamental reason why he had to take the risk to kill Yi Shiwen. What he really cared about was the legendary, peerless, ominous sword of Yi Shiwen. If he could obtain that peerless, ominous sword, then his strength would immediately increase by a notch. Hearing Jun Dingtian's words, Wu Dingzi had no choice but to agree. He immediately said, in this secret territory, there are not many who can be compared to us. Are we looking for Zhang Yin? Wu Dingzi said. Zhang Yin seems to have disappeared in the past few years. It's very likely that he has died here. In this generation, there were not many who could be compared to him. Moreover, they were all gathered in a secret territory. He had always been paying attention to these people, including Zhang Yin from the Battle Sage family. It was just that after Zhang Yin showed up once, he never appeared again. Many people secretly speculated that he might have already fallen. Although it was difficult for an expert of this level to fall, it wasn't impossible. I have found him. You don't have to worry about this. Jun Dingtian said. Who? Wu Dingzi asked immediately. How could he, Wu Dingzi, be an ordinary person? It's me. In the main hall, another figure slowly appeared. This was a tall and straight figure wrapped in a black cloak. Who are you? Wu Dingzi said coldly. First, it was Jun Dingtian. This black-cloaked man kept barging in. This had already made him very unhappy. He was even more vigilant towards himself, but he only noticed a little. First, let me see what kind of ability you have to join our team. Wu Dingzi sneered. There was a shocking burst of light in his pitch-black eyes. These scattered lights shot out, each shining with a shocking cold light. It was very shocking. Bang, 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 bang. These rays of light were completely blocked 3 inches in front of the black-cloaked man, unable to advance even a little bit. Interesting, Wu Dingzi sneered. His body disappeared instantly like a cloud of smoke. When he appeared again, he was already in front of the black-cloaked man. He grabbed the cloak of the black-cloaked man with lightning speed. I'd like to see who exactly you are. His palm was like a blade, breaking through the protective vigor chi of the black-cloaked man. I will let you know my identity, but there is no need to be so anxious. The black-cloaked man's counterattack was not slow. He directly shook off the big hand that was grabbing him and took a few steps back, not letting Wu Dingzi get his hands on him. Not bad. Wu Dingzi's figure once again appeared in his original appearance. The corner of his mouth slightly raised, reluctantly acknowledging the identity of this partner. I can give up the wealth this time, including the spring and autumn brush. But I have one request. You must kill Yi Shiwen first. I must kill him this time. Jun Dingtian said faintly, but the murderous intent in his words was indescribable. Sure, the spring and autumn brush must be mine. I don't care who you want to kill, and I can help you. Wu Dingzi nodded. He was still thinking about how to distribute the spring and autumn brush after getting it. He had to get it now, There was no one to compete with him. Although he didn't know what June Dingtian was planning, getting the spring and autumn brush was more important than anything else. If that's the case, then it's best, June Dingtian said coldly. This time, I will make him die without a burial place. If he can't escape this time, the black-cloaked man said coldly. His voice was hoarse like an owl's. It was very unpleasant and cold to the ears. This time, I must tear him into pieces and make him die without a burial place. Die, 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 die. If that's the case, let's go. Chapter 2572. Yi Shiwen rushed all the way, and in less than half a day, he had already arrived at the place where the Confucians were meeting. The reason for this was that Yi Shiwen's current strength had undergone a complete transformation. If it had been the same as before, it would have taken at least 2 or 3 days to arrive at this speed. Thus, when Yi Shiwen arrived, Gu Shiying and the others revealed completely surprised expressions, because even they had never imagined that Yi Shiwen could arrive in such a short time. Then there was only one possibility, and that was that Yi Shiwen had become even stronger. Gu Shiying couldn't help but be a little shocked. The place where the Confucian disciples were at was also not ordinary. It was an incomparably huge book mountain, and the book mountain had transformed into many immortal realms. It looked like a blessed land, but in reality, it was a terrifying battle fortress, and the fluctuations of activated formations could be seen at any time. This was also a very famous magic tool of the Confucian sect, the Book Mountain. This was a magic tool that many Confucians would refine, but the effects of each refinement were very different. This was because the things written in the Book Mountain were different, and the effects were also very different. Some people refined a book mountain that was like a bustling market, while others refined a book mountain that was like this, with dangerous mountains and precipitous ridges, like a real immortal realm. They were all different. This was also the embodiment of the great Tao in the minds of every Confucian disciple. Although it was the same magic tool, it could be refined into a myriad of different effects. And this book mountain was the book mountain that Gu Shiying had refined. It was very powerful, and the Confucian disciples could rely on it to sweep through everything. But at this time, there were many other disciples on the book mountain in addition to the Confucian disciples, all of whom were helpers that the Confucian sect had invited this time. They were all old antiques of the sect, and their strength wasn't bad. Although they couldn't compare to old king-level sects like the Confucian sect, there were still many old antiques in the sect who were above the sage realm. When Gu Shiying saw Yi Shiwen, he first sighed with emotion. "Brother Yi, it seems that your strength has improved in a few years." He still couldn't be completely sure whether this was true, but from Yi Shiwen's aura, he seemed to have faintly become a little stronger. However, in his eyes, he had only become a little stronger. There were fortuitous encounters everywhere on the Kurfürst Road. Many people could become stronger in a short period of time. It was nothing strange. However, he had never expected that Yi Shiwen would make a complete breakthrough to another realm. He couldn't be mentioned in the same breath anymore. However, the stronger Yi Shiwen was, the better it would be for him, and the higher his chances of seizing the spring and autumn brush would be. Even with his strength, he did not dare to say that he would definitely be able to obtain the spring and autumn brush. His opponent was truly not weak. Yi Shiwen followed Gu Shiying all the way up. Originally, there was no road, but now there was a road extending to the feet of the two people. As the saying goes, there is a path in a mountain of books. Soon, the two arrived at the top of the mountain. Yi Shiwen glanced around. Apart from the disciples of the Confucian sect, he actually saw a few familiar faces. One of them was Mu Yunxi. After not seeing her for many years, Mu Yunxi's strength had greatly improved. Compared to many years ago, she could be said to have made great progress. She had actually reached the peak of the immortal level. Obviously, she had also obtained great benefits on the Kurfürst Road. Of course, it also depended on who she was compared to. Compared to Yi Shiwen, she was far inferior. Originally, her realm was similar to Yi Shiwen's, but now, the difference was like heaven and earth. Apart from Mu Yunxi, there were also a few disciples of the Hidden Valley. Although Yi Shiwen did not know them, he could distinguish the unique aura of the Hidden Valley's techniques. There were all kinds of people, but their auras were extremely ancient. Obviously, they were a few antiques who had cultivated for a very long time. In terms of cultivation, at most they were similar to Mu Yunxi. For the current Yi Shiwen, it was not worth mentioning. Apart from the Hidden Valley, there were also some disciples of other sections. However, Yi Shiwen had never seen them before, and Yin Bai was entertaining them. Among these people, there was a young man dressed in a white robe with golden lines. He was tapping his folding fan with an impassioned look on his face. It's just a trifling spring and autumn brush. With this young master taking action, it won't be difficult at all. Yin Bai's complexion didn't look very good. This young man's words were like a slap to his face. If it wasn't difficult, then why would their Confucian sect go through so much trouble to find so many helpers? Wasn't this saying that they were incompetent? Miss Mu, I discovered that I've fallen in love with you since the moment I saw you. Can you give me a chance and become my wife? The young man suddenly turned to Mu Yunxi and said. Mu Yunxi's complexion slightly changed. It was obvious that this young man had been pestering her for a long time. If it weren't for his identity, she would have already berated him. Young Master Huan, others may not know you, but I know you. You already have 900 concubines. I don't know how many goddesses you've harmed. Now, you're talking about true love. Don't you think it's ridiculous? At this time, a young man walked out of the Hidden Valley and said with righteous indignation. As he spoke, he glanced at Mu Yunxi frequently, as if hoping to attract her attention. Young Master Huan's expression instantly darkened, and he shouted coldly, Who do you think you are? How dare you ruin this young master's business? Swish! Young Master Huan took a step forward and attacked at lightning speed. The young man from the Hidden Valley didn't even have time to react before he was slapped and sent flying like a spinning top. A sudden change occurred. No one had expected that young Master Acacia would actually attack without any warning. Everyone from the Hidden Valley was flustered and exasperated. Young Master Huan was simply too much. He didn't take their Hidden Valley seriously at all. In other words, he didn't take them seriously at all. Although the Hidden Valley was a monarch sect with 7 king-rank powerhouses, the Divine Union sect behind young Master Huan wasn't weak. They also had 8 king-rank powerhouses, which was slightly stronger than the Hidden Valley. Speaking of the Joyful Union Divine sect, everyone's hearts were as clear as a mirror. They were all very clear about their roots. The 8 king-rank powerhouses of the Divine Union sect were a family. Apart from the sect master, Divine King Huan, the other 7 king-rank powerhouses were his women. A family that could produce 8 king-rank powerhouses could be considered unique. It was also because of this that the Divine Union sect was particularly united. At least, that was how it seemed to outsiders. This young Master Huan was one of Divine King Huan's sons. It wasn't a big deal, as Divine King Huan had tens of thousands of sons. Among them, there were more than 100 who had become gods. However, this young Master Huan was his favorite son. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given him the name Huan. Although the Hidden Valley was on par with the Divine Union sect, these disciples could only be considered ordinary disciples. Their status couldn't be compared to young Master Huan. This was also the reason why Mu Yunxi had to tolerate him time and time again. Not only that, but young Master Huan's strength also far surpassed Mu Yunxi's. Young Master Huan, don't go too far. Mu Yunxi finally couldn't help but rebuke him. Too far? I'm too far? So what? I've never failed to get a woman I fancy. You'd better obediently follow me. Otherwise, you'll suffer. Young Master Huan's expression immediately changed. He completely took Mu Yunxi's words seriously. He was even planning to use force. Yin Bai, we came to help you at your invitation. Are you going to let him bully our Hidden Valley like this? Although our Hidden Valley has never produced an Empyrean emperor, we are not a place that anyone can bully. At this time, an old man of the Hidden Valley looked at Yin Bai and said angrily. His body was trembling, not from fear but from anger. Before Yin Bai could speak, young Master Huan immediately stepped forward and said, So what? So what if I bully you? Young Master Huan, our Confucian sect won't allow you to act recklessly. Yin Bai glared angrily and said, He was upright by nature, had a fiery temper, and liked to be straightforward. However, he couldn't stand such behavior the most. It was simply an insult. They had invited the people of the Hidden Valley, but young Master Hawan had forcibly followed them. Although they weren't afraid of trouble, they didn't want to offend the divine Hawan sect. Therefore, they had let them in. Who would have thought that so many problems would arise? Humph! No one can stop me from doing what I want to do. Young Master Hawan coldly snorted. A huge dragon bed emerged behind him. Hundreds of beautiful women were rolling around on the dragon bed, stroking their hair coquettishly and exuding a kind of lascivious aura. This pink lascivious aura fell on the bodies of many men present. Even though they were deities, they couldn't withstand the invasion of this aura. Their faces quickly turned red. Everyone circulated their internal energy to sweep away this kind of lascivious aura. Only then did they regain their clarity. Although it was only for a short while, it was enough to make them extremely shocked. With their firm minds, even if there were many lustful people among them, being lustful and being controlled by a lascivious aura were completely different. This dragon bed was extremely extraordinary. Looking at the hundreds of beautiful women lying on it, they were obviously controlled by this kind of lascivious aura and conquered by young Master Hawan. Everyone's expression was extremely unsightly. But young Master Hawan didn't feel anything wrong. On the contrary, he was extremely proud. Since the day he was born, he was already above hundreds of millions of people, and he never knew what it meant to give in. Even if everyone's eyes were unkind, he didn't feel the slightest bit uncomfortable. Could this be the divine Hawan sect's top-grade artifact, the yin-yang bed? Someone exclaimed in a low voice. Chapter 2573. Many people were shocked. There was a huge dragon bed in the Hawan divine sect. It was the yin-yang bed. The Hawan divine king did his business on this yin-yang bed every day. He indulged in debauchery every day. However, the cultivation technique of the Hawan divine sect was very special. It could only be completed on the bed. No, it's not the yin-yang bed. If it was the yin-yang bed, it would be very difficult for us to get rid of that obscene aura. Someone immediately reacted. However, they also quickly understood that even if it wasn't the yin-yang bed, it was still an imitation instrument. Moreover, its grade wasn't low. Mu Yunqi's face flushed red with anger. Although she was just an ordinary high-ranking disciple of the Hidden Valley, she had the prestige of the Hidden Valley. No matter where she went, no one would dare to slight her. Who would have thought that she would encounter a hedonistic son of rich parents who didn't follow common sense? He did as he pleased and did whatever he wanted. He was simply lawless and out of control. She was so angry that she couldn't speak. Since you don't have any objection, then let's do it here. What's done can't be undone. I will then propose marriage to your Hidden Valley. I think even that old bastard Flame Lord won't refuse. Young Master Hawan sneered and said. He instantly made a move and grabbed with his palm. A lustful light was emitting from his palm. Mu Yunqi suddenly felt as if his whole body had been locked up and he couldn't dodge it at all. She was imprisoned by a powerful force. Mu Yunqi suddenly became anxious and shouted, "Our Hidden Valley won't let you off if you continue like this." Humph! I want to see how the Hidden Valley won't let me off. You are just an ordinary disciple. It's your blessing to be chosen by this young master in your previous life. You dare to refuse? You don't know what's good for you. Hawan young master remained unmoved. Humph! A cold snort came from the void. And when Yin Bai heard this cold snort, his complexion completely changed because he had already completely heard the identity of this person. It was none other than Yi Shiwen. After all, Yi Shiwen was a disciple of the Hidden Valley. So, how could he possibly stand idly by when he saw a disciple of the Hidden Valley being humiliated? However, he also knew how terrifying Yi Shiwen was. Young Master Concord's strength was pretty good. However, Yi Shiwen was only capable of committing crimes by relying on his strength that was similar to his own. His strength was far inferior to Yi Shiwen's. If this young Master Concord really provoked Yi Shiwen, then the consequences would simply be unimaginable. He might even lose his life. If it was someone else, he would definitely not think this way. Yin Bai had always been a straightforward person and would not consider so much. However, this person was Yi Xuan. This person was not only tyrannical in strength, but more importantly, this person was cruel and merciless. Yin Bai had seen how cruel and merciless he was before. Someone like Zhang Yin had disappeared without a trace in the end. Although he did not see Yi Xuan kill Zhang Yin with his own eyes, how could he not guess it? Later on, they had secretly gathered information, but they did not find any news that Zhang Yin had already escaped. Then, there was only one possibility, and that was that Zhang Yin had died in Yi Xuan's hands. This Yi Xuan was definitely a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Zhang Yin had merely schemed against him, and he wanted all the experts of the Battle Saint family to be buried with him. Of course, he did not know that the people of the Battle Saint family had all died in the mouths of those monsters, and had nothing to do with Yi Xuan. If he allowed Yi Xuan to attack unscrupulously, then the consequences would be unimaginable. Although he disliked this guy, he did not dare to let him be killed in his own territory. Otherwise, that old thing, Divine King Concord, would go crazy. Therefore, in that instant, Yin Bai directly attacked. His spring and autumn brush moved, and in an instant, an overwhelming righteous aura bloomed. He wrote the word destroy, and directly destroyed young Master Concord's big hand. What are you trying to do? Young Master Concord was instantly enraged. He never imagined that Yin Bai would really dare to attack him for an indifferent female disciple. One must know that although they were both from the regal sect, how could his status be the same as Mu Yunshi's? If you have something to say, then let's talk it out. I have already said that our Confucian sect will not allow you to attack here. This matter is over, and I will not pursue your responsibility. However, I will absolutely not allow you to attack as you wish. Yin Bai said with a cold face. Regardless of whether it was due to emotion or reason, he would not allow young Master Concord to act recklessly. Otherwise, if news of this were to spread, their Confucian sect would lose all face and dignity in the future. Yin Bai, I advise you not to meddle in other people's business. Otherwise, this young master will make you suffer. Young Master Concord said with a cold face. His expression alternated between green and white, and he was abnormally angry. Although Yin Bai was doing this for his own good, he would not appreciate it. In his opinion, he had been slapped in the face, ruthlessly slapped in the face. Since he was a child, who had dared to slap him like this? It was simply preposterous. No, since this is our Confucian sect's territory, we will absolutely not allow this kind of bullying to happen, Yin Bai said. His body exuded an awe-inspiring righteousness. The most important thing for their Confucian sect was to be worthy of their seven apertures' exquisite heart. They had to act on behalf of the heavens, and act with awe-inspiring righteousness. Even if Yi Xuan was not present, he would not allow such a thing to happen. However, he would not be in such a hurry. No, I didn't care at first, but now I want her. The dignity of our Divine Union sect cannot be abandoned, young Master Concord said in a cold voice. He was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, and his hair suddenly stood on end. The dignity of Divine Union sect? What dignity? Tell me. At this time, Yi Xuan finally could not stand it anymore, and directly came out and said. Yin Bai's expression changed greatly. Yi Xuan had finally come out. He did not seem to feel the slightest anger from Yi Xuan, but he knew that the guy in front of him was not to be trifled with. Not only was his strength frighteningly strong, but most importantly, this guy was unscrupulous and ruthless. Young Master Concord seemed to be lawless, but in Yin Bai's mind, he was not even worthy to carry Yi Xuan's shoes. Look at what he had done, bullying people and taking advantage of women. This was the only thing he could do. But what did Yi Xuan do? Not to mention the earth-shattering things like killing several Sage Realm Pinnacle hundreds of years ago, he defeated Ao Chaozong, then later defeated Wu Ziyu, seriously injured Wu Zimo, and even saw Yi Xuan kill Zhang Yin with his own eyes. Any one of these matters would be enough to cause a sensation. This was what an extremely ruthless big shot was like. He was originally not convinced by Yi Xuan, But after Yi Shiwen beat him into submission, he no longer had those delusions occupying his mind, and suddenly became very clear. This person was not to be trifled with. He was not to be trifled with. Compared to Yi Shiwen, young Master Concord was nothing. If not for his identity, Yanbai would not even be bothered to talk to him. Dragons do not dance with snakes, and tigers do not live with cats. This was the truth. Who was young Master Concord to be worthy of being friends with him? But at this time, young Master Concord did not know that Yanbai was silently criticizing him and severely belittling him. Otherwise, with his pride, he would probably fight 300 rounds with Yanbai before he was done. And who are you? Young Master Concord's expression became even more unfriendly. Did he not look at the almanac when he went out today? One thing after another did not go his way. Wasn't he just trying to snatch a woman? It was not the first time he had done it. Who would have thought that there would be people trying to play the hero and save the damsel in distress? And he ended up becoming the legendary villain. How could he feel good about it? Even if he was a villain, no one would think that he was a villain. I am also a disciple of the Hidden Valley. Yi Shiwen leisurely walked in front of young Master Concord. Brother Yi. Mu Yinshi looked at Yi Shiwen in surprise. She never thought that Yi Shiwen would actually appear in this place. It was like a divine soldier had descended from the heavens. Since they separated more than 1,000 years ago, there was not much interaction between them. The gap between the two seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. Mu Yunshi had only cultivated to the peak of the longevity realm, and her progress could be said to be very fast. But compared to Brother Yi, who came from the same sect, she was dwarfed. Both sides were like a little white pigeon and a soaring eagle. After a short interaction, there was no more interaction, but there was still a lot of contact with the Monkey Ten Saints. She would also hear about Yi Shiwen's deeds from time to time through the younger generations of the Hidden Valley. She would also hear about his deeds from time to time. In her opinion, he would undoubtedly do earth-shattering deeds one after another, and his reputation would grow bigger and bigger day by day. She knew very well that she was just an immortal level, and it would be even more difficult for her to meet him in the future. However, she had never expected that they would meet again in such a place. Yi Shiwen appeared like a divine soldier who had descended from the sky. The other disciples of the Hidden Valley were also moved, and they could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Even if they were antiques and did not care about the affairs of the world, they had still heard about the emergence of two peerless figures in this generation, and one of them was Yi Shiwen. As for what he had done, there was no need for him to say it himself. Countless people had opened their mouths to say it. Regardless of whether they were disciples of the Flame Lord or not, at least they were disciples of the Hidden Valley at this time, and naturally, they were united against outsiders. At this time, they all had relaxed looks on their faces. Although Yi Shiwen was a junior, his strength was obviously far beyond their imagination. They looked at young Master Concord with a faint provocation in their eyes. Come on, you can only bully old guys like us. Now that the most outstanding disciple of the Hidden Valley is here, continue to jump around if you have the ability. Chapter 2574. Deities were also divided into different levels. It was clear that these Hidden Valley people were not on the same level as Hahuan Gongzi. Whether it was status or strength, they were simply not on the same level. Whether they were willing or not, they could not erase this fact. But although they could not, the Hidden Valley had produced such an outstanding disciple. They were naturally full of confidence and were not afraid of Hahuan Gongzi. Although Hahuan Gongzi did not recognize Yi Shiwen, he could see that he should also be a disciple of the Hidden Valley. His face was faintly unhappy and somewhat fierce. Don't look for trouble, Hahuan Gongzi faintly threatened. Look for trouble? I'd like to see what it's like to look for trouble. Yi Shiwen's expression was slightly cold. He took a step forward, not the slightest bit afraid of Hahuan Gongzi. Brother Yi, give me some face. Don't fight here. Yanbai stepped forward and said, Yanbai, do you want to protect this guy? Provoking our divine Hahuan sect will not be let off so easily. Hahuan Gongzi thought that Yanbai wanted to protect this guy, so he immediately stepped forward and said in a sarcastic tone. Yanbai's face darkened immediately. He was enraged. He was a straightforward person with a fiery temper, He had been patient for a few times. He didn't expect this Huan Gongzi to think he was afraid and wanted more. Huan Gongzi, I am afraid that you will die. Do you think I am biased towards him? Yan Bai immediately said in a sarcastic tone. Although it was difficult for him to imitate Huan Gongzi's words perfectly, the effect was already achieved. However, the effect had been achieved. Huan young master was immediately seething with anger. He thought highly of himself and was extremely dissatisfied with Yan Bai's favoritism towards Yi Shiwen. But now, Yan Bai's words had made him even angrier. He was simply burning with rage. This was simply an unforgivable mistake. Who was this person? Many people began to whisper in their hearts. Although young Master Concord's reputation wasn't good, and he was a hedonistic son of rich parents, it was undeniable that he was very strong. With an expert like Divine King Concord as his backing, his strength wasn't bad at all. In fact, he even surpassed the vast majority of his peers. This was another important reason why young Master Concord was so arrogant. If he didn't have this foundation of strength, he wouldn't dare to be so arrogant and despotic even though he was God King Concord's most beloved son. Otherwise, he would be crushed to death by a few flustered and exasperated people. Even so, from Yan Bai's point of view, it was still this delicate-looking young man who was more powerful, and the fact that young Master Huan could still die was the real reason why everyone was shocked. Good. Then I want to see just how much ability he has to be so rampant. Young Master Huan said in a flustered and exasperated manner. He had been arrogant and despotic since the beginning of his career. Not to mention outside, even within the Divine Concord sect, he was equally arrogant. He was also incomparably arrogant towards the thousands of brothers and sisters in the sect. He had been hated, cursed behind his back, and cursed to his face, but he had never been looked down upon. Such a matter was simply a great humiliation. Young Master Concord suddenly let out a long and loud roar. His broad palms shook, and a lustful aura spread out in all directions. It turned into two huge Concord characters in the air, faintly resembling the scene of a man and a woman having intercourse. Countless principals were cheering in joy as they condensed and slapped down towards Yi Shiwen. Young Master Concord angrily rushed out and didn't hold back in the slightest. Everyone cried out in alarm and gave way one after another. Only the people of the Confucian sect were unusually calm, as if they weren't worried at all. They had seen Yi Shiwen's even more terrifying battles. A mere attack of this level was just a trifling matter. Yan Bai's face revealed a slight sneer. This young Master Concord was really tired of living. Yan Bai might have been wary of the relationship between the Confucian sect and the Divine Concord sect, and wouldn't have been so heavy-handed, but the one in front of him was a living god of death. Even Zhang Yin had been killed, let alone a mere young Master Concord. Brother Yi, be careful. Mu Yunxi suddenly cried out in alarm. The people of the Confucian sect had seen Yi Shiwen's strength, so they weren't worried. However, she hadn't seen Yi Shiwen for a long time, and her impression of him was that of thousands of years ago. Although she had heard of Yi Shiwen's deeds, she had never seen him in action, so she naturally didn't know his true strength. But she was well aware of young Master Concord's strength, so she couldn't help but cry out in alarm. And just as her voice fell, Yi Shiwen finally made his move. His body shook, and suddenly, the entire space produced a huge vibration. This vibration caused the sky to collapse and the earth to crack. The matrix on the mountain of books that Gu Shiying had refined shattered one after another. It was completely useless. It couldn't stop him at all. Yi Shiwen just coldly snorted and pointed his finger. In an instant, the sky turned dark and the earth turned dark. It seemed as if his finger had cut the world into two pieces. The terrifying finger's strength had transformed into a formidable force which directly swept across the sky and blew the two words of young Master Concord's harmonious union into two halves. The might of Yi Shiwen's severing heavenly finger was much more tyrannical than it had been in the past. Moreover, he didn't need to use any particularly powerful moves to deal with young Master Huan with his current strength. Ordinary moves could be used to display earth-shattering might in front of his profound martial power. It was the same principle as Qiao Feng's founding ancestors' long fist that had rendered the group of heroes helpless. This is impossible. Huan young master was taken aback when he saw that the two words Huan had been directly broken. His body retreated again and again to avoid Yi Shiwen's terrifying finger strength. He could see that Yi Shiwen's move wasn't too brilliant. At least, it couldn't be regarded as too brilliant in comparison to his current realm. It could only be regarded as ordinary. However, this ordinary martial technique had displayed an earth-shattering might, and had even broken his brilliant martial technique. He recalled that his father, God King Concord, had once told him a point. It was that one man could defeat 10 men with sheer strength. It wasn't that he didn't understand this truth. To be able to cultivate to his current realm, his martial arts wisdom was absolutely not low. However, the problem was that he had never thought that a guy with a lower realm than him would be able to overcome 10 with absolute strength. Shouldn't this be done by someone with high strength against someone with low strength? Could it be that Yi Shiwen's strength is higher than mine? How is this possible? Young Master Concord was referring to this matter when he said that it was impossible. Humph! Yi Shiwen sneered and took a step forward. He directly arrived in front of young Master Concord and pointed his finger. Suddenly, a terrifying finger force sealed the world. It directly traversed the world, like a huge cage, sealing everything. Yi Shiwen's whole body gushed out a formidable magical power, filling the world. It was truly a boundless magical power and matchless magical power. Many gods in the surroundings were forced to retreat again and again, even under the protection of the array formation. The scene created by Yi Shiwen's attack was truly terrifying. As soon as he attacked, there was a terrifying scene of him suppressing everyone with his strength alone. Yi Shiwen's finger had suppressed all resistance. The obscene aura exuding from young Master Concord's body simply couldn't withstand the sweep of Yi Shiwen's terrifying finger strength. It crumbled inch by inch, disintegrated, and melted into the world. Young Master Concord suddenly felt an incomparably formidable power locking him down. That finger seemed to have become the incarnation of the world, containing the supreme power of heaven and earth, suppressing all directions. I don't care who you are. You dare to play tricks in front of this young master? You're courting death. Young Master Huan was infuriated. His eyes gleamed with a terrifying light. One must know that he had been played by someone with a lower cultivation base than him. To him, this was a complete humiliation. How could he let this go? Bang! Suddenly, the lascivious aura on his body suddenly became even more intense. The rich, lascivious aura even took the form of a liquid. It rushed towards Yi Shiwen in an attempt to affect his mind. Idiot, can this level of power affect me? Yi Shiwen sneered. Even without the protection of the enlightening mind ancient tree, he was not afraid of this lascivious aura. It was still far from being able to affect his mind. Bang! Yi Shiwen's heaven-imprisoning finger continued to fall. However, young Master Concord's body unexpectedly exuded a pink lascivious aura that blocked his heaven-imprisoning finger. Yi Shiwen fixed his eyes on it and suddenly understood. If it wasn't the joyous dragon bed, then what was it? It was the joyous dragon bed that had blocked Yi Shiwen's heaven-imprisoning finger. Otherwise, young Master Concord would have already been defeated by Yi Shiwen. Moreover, Yi Shiwen discovered that the power of his heaven-imprisoning finger had begun to be absorbed by the joyous dragon bed. The more power it absorbed, the more tyrannical the imposing aura of young Master Concord became. It swept out and caused Yi Shiwen's clothes to flutter in the wind. Ha ha ha, don't you feel it? This is the ability of the joyous dragon bed. No matter what kind of attack you use, it is impossible to break the defense of the joyous dragon bed. All the energy will become nutrients for me, making me even more powerful. Young Master Concord laughed and said in an incomparably savage manner. His complexion became even more ferocious, but there was a hint of joy in his expression. It seemed as if he wanted to prove to everyone that their eyes were blind. They had actually thought that Yi Shiwen could win. It was simply a big joke. This is all thanks to you. It is because of you that I have become even more powerful. Ha ha! Young Master Concord's aura was becoming more and more powerful with every passing second. He was like a giant beast from the abyss, devouring everything. All the energy was being swallowed by him. I want to see how much he can swallow. Chapter 2575. This person can't do anything to young Master Hawan. The Hawan dragon bed is really amazing. Although this joyous union dragon bed is only a replica, its grade will be extremely high and its power will be even more tyrannical. It can even block such an attack and completely transform it into its own power. It's simply unimaginable. If this goes on, won't he be invincible? No matter who fights with him, he will be able to absorb their strength. It seems like the rumor that Divine King Concord dotes on this son the most and that young Master Concord has obtained all the true inheritance should be true. The joyous Union Dragon bed really has an advantage in cultivation that others can't compare to. Everyone was shocked to see that the Hahuan Dragon bed was able to easily block Yi Shiwen's attack. Even Yen Bai was a bit surprised. He didn't expect young Master Hahuan to have such a trump card. As he absorbed more and more of Yi Shiwen's power, the magic power of young Master Concord's whole body skyrocketed. The Lingqi of the world was being absorbed, forming a huge whirlpool and storm. Countless principles also became active in an instant. It was as if all the gods and devils in the sky were projected onto his body at this moment. At this moment, he was the invincible overlord of the world, dominating everything. I would like to see how much you can swallow, Yi Shiwen indifferently said. The heaven-imprisoning finger continued to crush down, as if it was endless. No matter how much young Master Hahuan absorbed, it didn't waver in the slightest, as if he couldn't feel his power being absorbed by young Master Hahuan. Ha ha ha, it's useless. No matter how much magical power you have, I will absorb it cleanly, young Master Hahuan proudly said. Then, in a flash, he took the initiative to launch an attack. He took a step forward and arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. His hands suddenly made a tearing motion and directly rushed towards Yi Shiwen's chest, intending to tear Yi Shiwen into two halves. Yi Shiwen didn't dodge or evade. Instead, he exchanged two blows with him. Both sides were equally matched. It seemed that there was no winner or loser. At that time, young Master Concord was still not satisfied and continued to launch attacks towards Yi Shiwen. But soon, he discovered the problem, because the heaven-imprisoning finger was still transmitting a steady stream of magic power to Yi Shiwen without any signs of stopping. He originally thought that Yi Shiwen would soon run out of magic power and the heaven-imprisoning finger would soon dissipate. But now it seemed that the heaven-imprisoning finger didn't dissipate at all. On the contrary, it was constantly condensing. He had actually reached the upper limit of what he could absorb. This was incredible. If he continued to absorb at this rate, he would definitely report it. How did he do it? Hahuan young master opened his eyes wide and stared at Yi Shiwen. It seemed as if he had encountered the most inconceivable thing in his life. His cultivation level was higher than Yi Shiwen's. Even if a low-level expert could rely on some magical tools or magical martial arts to contend against a high-level expert, but he had never heard of someone whose magic power was more profound than his. It was simply unimaginable. Everyone soon discovered that something was wrong with young Master Concord because he didn't seem to be taking advantage of the situation to attack. It seemed as if he was resisting something. Soon, everyone saw that young Master Concord's clothes began to bulge and his complexion began to turn red. It seemed as if he was suffering from constipation. Yen Bai and Gu Shuriying had profound skills and were the first to see the problem. Young Master Concord couldn't absorb anymore. The gazes of the two instantly turned towards Yi Shiwen, as if they had seen a monster. If Yi Shiwen was simply strong, then it would have been fine, but his magic power was actually so profound. His cultivation level was obviously much lower than that of young Master Yihuan, but he was actually able to push young Master Yihuan to this point. It was clear that he wanted to stuff him to death. If young Master Concord didn't think of a way to solve this problem, then he would certainly be stuffed to death by Yi Shiwen. Everyone also discovered the problem at this time and were even more surprised in their hearts. What kind of joke was this? Not only was Yi Shiwen causing young Master Concord to explode, but he himself didn't seem to have the slightest lack of magic power. On the contrary, it seemed as if his magic power was profound, and he wasn't even panting. How could young Master Concord endure this? It was simply a slap in the face. Moreover, they also felt that Yi Shiwen's martial power was profound. To what extent? If it was an ordinary person, then they would have already exhausted their magic power and died. They wouldn't have dared to confront the young Master Concord Dragonbed. In this regard, they could only say that Yi Shiwen was indeed a freak. One simply couldn't use the standards of a normal person to measure this guy. Bang! A huge explosion rang out. Young Master Conhuan finally couldn't hold on any longer. His body exploded, unable to hold on at all. He turned into a bloody mist that filled the sky. It was an extremely tragic scene. Ah! A scream came from the aftermath of this endless explosion. In the midst of the terrifying shock waves, a figure jumped out. It was young Master Concord. Young Master Concord no longer had the arrogant appearance of a moment ago. On the contrary, he was incomparably embarrassed. Just now, in front of everyone, under the watchful eyes of everyone, he had completely exploded. Although he had reassembled, it was needless to say that the damage to his body was extremely great. At this time, he looked at Yi Shiwen with a bit of fear in his eyes. This was true fear. Facing Yi Shiwen, he finally felt the feeling of the current Yen Bai. It was unfathomable, as if he could never reach the bottom. Yi Shiwen had easily broken his most prided technique, as if his technique was simply child's play in front of Yi Shiwen. How could this not make him feel fear? This is a little interesting, but that's it. I want to see how much the dignity of your young Master Concord Divine Sect is worth. Yi Shiwen sneered and issued a long roar. In an instant, his whole body was like a rock spreading its wings. He flew into the sky and then swooped down towards young Master Concord. Young Master Concord's kingdom was simply not a match for Yi Shiwen. It unexpectedly broke apart and couldn't even block Yi Shiwen's attack. Young Master Concord didn't even have time to react. Just as he was in shock, Yi Shiwen had already arrived in front of him. His divine kingdom had completely collapsed. This pressure was not something that could be easily resisted. How can he be so strong? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Young Master Concord's eyes were bloodshot, as if he had gone crazy. He simply couldn't accept this matter. With his strength, he could run amok among his peers. Even if he was slightly inferior, he shouldn't have been beaten without any strength to fight back. Looking at Yi Shiwen's appearance, it was clear that he was very relaxed and didn't seem to have used his full strength. This further stimulated his self-esteem. On his body, the joyous dragon bed instantly flew out and burst out with a piercing ray of light, which rushed towards Yi Shiwen's face to kill him. Young Master Concord's dragon bed had unexpectedly ignited. Even so, he still wanted to kill Yi Shiwen. One could well imagine how much he hated Yi Shiwen. Otherwise, it wouldn't be easy to repair such a divine tool once it was ignited. The price would be very high. Is this all you've got? Break for me. A huge ray of light erupted from Yi Shiwen's hand. Boundless sword intention condensed, soared into the sky, and suddenly chopped down. Rumble! Yi Shiwen's ruler's sword intention seemed to dominate everything in the world. It directly collided with young Master Concord's dragon bed. Two terrifying forces rippled out and turned into shock waves. Too strong. How can he be so strong? I can't even get close to him. Someone exclaimed. These people were directly pushed away and couldn't get close to Yi Shiwen. The entire book mountain was also violently shaking. The dazzling rays of light made many people unable to open their eyes. Yen Bai and Gu Shiring also looked at each other in dismay. They seemed to see the shock in each other's eyes. They were thoroughly shocked. After not seeing Yi Shiwen for a few years, it seemed that Yi Shiwen had become stronger and more skillful. It was obvious that young Master Concord had used his full strength, but Yi Shiwen was still leisurely and hadn't used his full strength. With such a comparison, it was simply too obvious. They had originally overestimated Yi Shiwen's strength, but now they discovered that they had underestimated Yi Shiwen too much. Suddenly, in the midst of such a collision, a huge explosion sounded. Everyone stared at the source of the explosion. Unexpectedly, the invincible joyous dragon bed began to disintegrate inch by inch under the pressure of Yi Shiwen's ruler's sword intent. There were even pitiful screams coming from inside the bed. This was the joyous dragon bed's tool spirit. After absorbing the essence of countless women, the joyous dragon bed had already formed a tool spirit. Moreover, it was constantly growing stronger, but it was completely useless. Under the pressure of Yi Shiwen's ruler's sword intent, even the body of the joyous dragon bed had collapsed. Boom! Finally, the dragon bed directly collapsed, turning into gravel in the sky and scattering in the wind. Then, this amazing ruler's sword intention didn't lose its momentum and directly chopped down on young Master Concord's body. Everyone's hearts suddenly tightened. This Yi Shiwen really dared to make a move. At this time, everyone remembered what Yin Bai had said before. He had said that young Master He Huan might die. This was not a bluff. It was something that would really happen. Having the strength was one thing, but having the courage was another. It was obvious that Yi Shiwen had the strength and courage to do so. Once God King Concord learned that his most beloved son had died, it would be an unimaginable horror. It would cause a great upheaval in all directions. Old man, save me. Chapter 2576. Old man, save me. At the most critical moment, young Master Concord roared in despair. Sigh. An old sigh came from the void. Then a skinny claw came out of the void and directly grabbed Yi Shiwen's Dominator's sword will. Yi Shiwen's Dominator's sword will had already been greatly weakened because it had cut through the Concord dragon bed. It was easily torn to pieces by this skinny claw. All of this happened in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. When the dust settled, everyone finally reacted. They all felt a sense of relief. If they had seen young Master Concord being killed with their own eyes, the scene would have been too exciting. That kind of sour feeling was simply unbelievable. With God King Concord's lawless personality, who knew what kind of trouble he would cause? More importantly, it was very likely that he would vent his anger on them. The Confucian sect was powerful and had as many experts as there were clouds in the sky. Their strength was unfathomable. As a regal sect, God King Concord might not dare to act against them, but it would be much easier for him to deal with them. In other words, when these immortals fought, the mortals would suffer. They couldn't help but look at Yi Shiwen with fear in their eyes. They weren't afraid of strength, but they were afraid of this kind of cruel and merciless person who didn't care about the rules. It seemed that the rules were nothing to him. If he said he would kill you, then he would really kill you. This kind of person wasn't the best to provoke. However, they had witnessed everything. This is really 2F asterisk king exciting. Gu Shiring and Yin Bai's expressions were extremely ugly. Someone had actually appeared in front of them without them noticing. What would happen if he came with hostility? Of course, it wasn't that they didn't know anything. It was just that this person was relatively far away. Now that he had entered the mountain of books, they immediately discovered him. Thinking of this, the two's expressions became much better. Yi Shiwen seemed to have already expected this. Or rather, he had already sensed the existence of that person. He wasn't surprised. He withdrew his hand and looked at the void with a deep gaze, as if he could see through everything. Young man, don't go overboard. An old and proud voice came from the void. Overboard? If he wants to kill me, it's not a big deal. But if I want to kill him, is that too much? Yi Shiwen faintly asked. He couldn't help but sneer as if he had seen a big joke. That is indeed the case. I believe that you should be very clear about his status in our joyful Union Divine sect. The old voice echoed from the void. This is too much. The joyful Union sect has gone too far. How could the people of the Hidden Valley not understand? They were afraid that other experts of the Acacia Divine sect had also joined in. However, even if they wanted to bully others, they shouldn't bully others like this. It was fine if young Master Acacia bullied them, but if they wanted to retaliate, then it would be wrong. Did they really think that their Hidden Valley was so easy to bully? It's none of my business. Yi Shiwen coldly glanced at him and said. The Hidden Valley disciples immediately felt extremely refreshed. That's right, No matter how high young Master Acacia's status in the Acacia Divine sect was, it had nothing to do with them. None of their business. Yi Shiwen's foot stepped on young Master Acacia's body, as if he was stepping on a dead dog. Young Master Acacia screamed again and again, but he couldn't break free. Yi Shiwen's strength was astonishing. Boy, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Although your strength is good, but in front of this old man, you are still far behind. Being so arrogant at such a young age is not good. Whether a genius can grow up or not is still a problem. The old voice said coldly. Everyone could hear the strong threat in his voice. Obviously, if Yi Shiwen didn't listen to him, then he might not be able to grow up. In fact, it was very likely that he would die prematurely. Many people secretly cursed at how despicable he was. He had actually arranged for such an expert to protect him in secret. Divine King Concord had thought of everything that needed to be thought of. This old man was probably very strong, and was enough to protect young Master Concord's safety in the Kerfus Road, coupled with young Master Acacia's own strength. As long as he didn't provoke those monstrous geniuses, it shouldn't be a big problem for him to escape unscathed. Can't grow up? All you can do is bully the younger generation. Have you been living your life like a dog all these years? If I only had this little cultivation at your age, I might as well commit suicide out of shame, Yi Shiwen said unceremoniously. Although the crowd couldn't see the change in the expression of the person in the void, they could feel that his entire aura had begun to solidify. It was as if the air had solidified all of a sudden. It was completely imaginable how furious the person in the void was. One shouldn't hit people in the face, and one shouldn't expose people's shortcomings when scolding people. Yi Shiwen just had to hit people in the face and expose their shortcomings. It was simply a great humiliation. The old man's cultivation wasn't bad, so it wasn't embarrassing. Of course, this also depended on who he was compared to. Compared to Yi Shiwen, there was no comparison at all. Yi Shiwen had reached this realm in only a few thousand years, so this slap in the face was resounding. Forget it, forget it! An old voice came from the void, but it didn't contain the slightest emotion. It was full of killing intent. Originally, I didn't want to bother with a junior because of the Flame Lord, but since you want to die, don't blame me for being ruthless. The Flame Lord's reputation? Who do you think you are? How dare you compare yourself to him? Yi Shiwen's expression changed as he said. When he mentioned the Flame Lord, he finally began to be moved. It was because the Flame Lord had always given him too much help. Many times, it was the Flame Lord who helped him in crucial breakthroughs. He might not feel much about the Hidden Valley, but when it came to the Flame Lord, he couldn't help but be moved. Junior, you're too arrogant. The voice in the void was really angry to the point of bursting out. Come out, you sneaky ghost. Who do you think you are? Yi Shiwen instantly attacked and blasted a punch towards the void. The sky was blasted into fragments, and a human figure was revealed from within. Everyone looked over, and it turned out to be a strange old man. This old man was wearing a yellow robe, but the strange thing about him was that half of his body had decayed. The remaining half was simply skin and bones. It was extremely ugly, like a demon from hell. This person, could he be the withered old man under Divine King Concord? At this moment, Gu Shiring thought for a moment and seemed to recognize the origin of the old man in front of her. She quickly reminded Yi Shiwen. I didn't expect that after so many years of seclusion, there would still be a junior who would recognize me. That's right, I am the withered old man. The old man had a smile on his face, but half of his face was rotten and the other half was withered, so he looked extremely hideous. Senior, it's really inappropriate for a senior like you to bully a junior. Gu Shiring stepped forward and said. If it was just young Master Concord, he naturally had nothing to worry about. With Yi Shiwen's strength, he could crush him. What happened just now had completely proved his guess. However, if compared to the withered old man, there was no comparison at all. It wasn't that Yi Shiwen was too weak, but the withered old man's reputation was too great. Before he became a god, he had heard all kinds of rumors about the withered old man. Later, the withered old man seemed to have offended some powerhouse, so he went into seclusion. After that, no one had seen him again. He didn't expect that the former powerhouse had already surrendered to divine King Concord, and even became a subordinate of young Master Concord. Gu Shuriying, for the sake of the Confucian sect, I didn't bother with you juniors. However, you better not interfere in this matter. Otherwise, you won't be able to bear the consequences. The withered old man immediately turned hostile. Killing intent was released from his body. Yi Shiwen's words just now had completely enraged him. You shouldn't hit people in the face, but Yi Shiwen had specifically slapped his face. He was already furious, and he had to kill Yi Shiwen. In any case, if anything happened, there was still divine King Concord. With the matter of young Master Concord, he didn't believe that divine King Concord would ignore this matter. Today, no one can save this brat. He really has no limits to his arrogance. He deserves to die. The withered old man said coldly. Yi Shiwen, leave quickly. We'll stop him here. He won't dare to do anything to us. Gu Shuriying hurriedly said to Yi Shiwen. A veteran powerhouse, like the withered old man, wasn't someone ordinary people could compare to. Even in a place like the Kerfurst Road, which was full of powerhouses, he was still a first-rate powerhouse. Leave? The withered old man, have never failed to kill anyone I wanted to kill. The withered old man's face twitched, looking incomparably ferocious. His aura was released to the maximum, locking down the surroundings. It was as if every place was locked down by him, suppressing everything. You people of the Confucian sect actually dare to help him? Then don't blame me for being impolite. I might as well take care of you all together. The withered old man said coldly. He was confident that he could kill these juniors. Withered old man, don't go too far. Gu Shuriying immediately said coldly. She was very anxious. The spring and autumn brush had already appeared in Gu Shuriying's hand, ready to attack at any time. Yin Bai, who was next to her, was also preparing. Even the disciples of the Confucian sect were on their guard. They could ignore the threats of others, but they couldn't ignore an old antique like the withered old man, a veteran powerhouse. How am I going too far? You have to protect the person I want to kill. Just this alone is a crime punishable by death. It seems that I haven't walked the world for too long. You've all forgotten how terrifying I am. The withered old man said with a sinister smile. You're just an old thing with one foot in the grave. You still have a nerve to talk about being someone's dog? Chapter 2577. You're just an old man with one foot in the grave. How dare you say you're a dog? Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Yi Shiwen had once again ruthlessly slapped the old man's face. This old man was already stamping with rage. If he continued to provoke him, the consequences would be dire. Good. I haven't seen such an arrogant kid in a long time. This should be the last time I see you. The old man's face was completely distorted. His whole body was trembling. He was probably about to explode from Yi Shiwen's anger. He was completely enraged. Today, none of you will leave. The old man's hands shook and the space was suddenly sealed. A skinny claw instantly came down. Old man, this is not a place for your arrogance. Gu Shuriying said with an ugly expression. He took a step forward and actually fought with the old man. In an instant, they had clashed thousands of times. The old man looked inconspicuous, but his strength was extraordinary. He was able to force Gu Shuriying, who had the spring and autumn brush, back with his bare hands. Gu Shuriying's expression became even worse. With his strength, he couldn't do anything to the withered old man. Among the experts of this generation, he was already a first-rate expert, but compared to a veteran like the withered old man, there was still such a large gap. For many people, they were already high above unsurpassable miracles. But for the old antiques, they were indeed qualified and had the strength to say that they had not grown up yet. As soon as they started fighting, they could clearly feel the gap in strength between them. Yin Bai, who was on the side, was ready to attack at any time. The other Confucian disciples were almost the same. This old man was too terrifying. He was not an existence that they could fight alone. Do you regret it now? Unfortunately, there's no medicine for regret now. The old man sneered. Originally, he had been afraid of the Hidden Valley and the Confucian sect, these two king-rank sections. Any one of them could easily destroy him. However, he had changed his mind. He wanted to seize the spring and autumn brush. When the time came, he could borrow the spring and autumn brush's artifact spirit, as well as the King Dao laws contained within it. With its accumulation, it could transform into a king-ranked expert. At that time, he would be able to establish his own sect with ease. These two sects would not be able to threaten him. Thinking of this, his eyes lit up, and he began to have some fanaticism. A decaying aura emanated from the withered old man's body. He mainly cultivated the decaying nomological laws, which was why he had turned himself into such a ghastly state. However, he had already made up his mind. As long as he entered the king-ranked realm, his decaying nomological laws would be perfected. At that time, he would be able to naturally return to his origins and would no longer have to live in this world in such a ghastly state. That terrifying, decaying aura seemed to have turned into a boundless hell. Countless terrifying ghosts and rotten corpses manifested within it. This was an abyss divine kingdom, and it was also the martial path that the withered old man had condensed that belonged solely to him. What's there to be afraid of? It's just an old dog with one foot in the grave. Yi Shiwen didn't have the slightest fear. He just took a step forward and said in a cold voice, "You don't have to worry. Just leave this place to me." You. Even though Yi Shiwen had always been a miracle in Gu Shiying's heart, he still didn't believe it at this time. It was not that he didn't want to believe Yi Shiwen, but the withered old man was too strong. He estimated that even if Yi Shiwen was stronger than him, there would be a limit. The withered old man was not at the same level at all. There was only a small realm difference, but the gap between them was enough to turn the world upside down. Brother Yi, how can you still be in the mood to joke at this time? This old guy is hard to deal with. Why don't we join forces? Yin Bai's personality was more direct, so he immediately said, in his opinion, this was the safest way. Joke? Do you think I'm joking? Then watch how I get rid of this old dog. Yi Shiwen didn't explain much. He suddenly stepped on the ground and instantly released a terrifying power. A dreadful power rippled out. This was an unimaginable power. The entire world trembled, and the Concord young master, who was under his feet, actually exploded under his foot in the blink of an eye. An endless amount of power surged into his body, causing him to be unable to withstand it in an instant. He exploded and turned into a mist of blood again. But this time, he was not as lucky as before. His primordial spirit was directly destroyed by the stomp. There was no way for him to revive. Ah! The whole sky was filled with young master He Huan's screams. Everyone was shocked. Yi Shiwen really killed young master He Huan. He was ruthless. Some people felt like fainting. They were going crazy. They couldn't imagine how furious Divine King He Huan would be after learning of young master He Huan's tragic death. Young master He Huan was very favored by Divine King He Huan. There were even rumors that Divine King He Huan would pass the Divine Union sect to young master He Huan in the future. Now that young master He Huan had fallen here, it would be a huge earthquake. Even the people of the Hidden Valley were no exception. At that time, the Hidden Valley and the Joyful Union Divine Sect would not be able to escape. Although the Kurfürst Road was like this, and even monstrous geniuses could fall, how many people would be able to accept it when it really happened? You. The withered old man went completely crazy. Yi Shiwen had killed young master He Huan. This was not only a slap to his face, but it was also forcing him to flee for his life. He was sent by God King He Huan to protect young master He Huan, but now he failed to do so. It was easy to imagine how big of an uproar it would cause once this news spread. He didn't know if God King He Huan would find trouble with the Hidden Valley, but he was sure that he wouldn't let him off. He had provoked such a formidable enemy for no reason at all. And this was all because of Yi Shiwen's fault. He was simply mad with anger. Go to hell. He had completely lost his mind. With a loud roar, a terrifying power was completely released, forming a huge rotten corpse kingdom. It was incomparably powerful. In an instant, this divine kingdom enveloped Yi Shiwen. Shred into pieces. Countless rotten corpses and malicious ghosts pounced on Yi Shiwen. Humph! Yi Shiwen coldly snorted, and released the power in his body completely. The power that he had just cultivated was completely released. Countless sword ki gushed out of his pores and formed a sword dragon, which protected him inside, rising up and down. The rotten corpses and malicious ghosts that pounced on him were all strangled by the sword chi of this sword dragon. They could not get close to Yishuan at all. It completely resisted the divine kingdom of the withered old man without any pressure. So strong! Yanbai could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Although he was aware that he had overestimated Yishuan's strength, but now it seemed that he had not fully grasped Yishuan's strength. He was afraid that it was not as simple as it seemed. Gu Shiring's eyes were also constantly flashing with horror. Although she did not say anything, the shock in her heart was naturally needless to say. She had personally fought with the withered old man just now. She knew how powerful the withered old man was. It was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. And Yi Shiwen, who was not at a disadvantage, was also unfathomable. No wonder he dared to speak so rudely before. Now it seemed that it was not because he had lost his head and was arrogant, but because he had the strength to say such words. Mu Yunxi looked at Yi Shiwen's powerful figure. She could not help but feel happy and a little sad. She was happy that Yi Shiwen was strong and naturally did not have to worry about the threat of the withered old man. She was sad that perhaps from now on, the gap between them would only grow larger. With Yi Shiwen's current performance, as long as there were no accidents, it was a sure thing that he would be crowned king in the future. And she might not be able to cultivate to the sage plane even if she trained for hundreds of thousands of years, and it was possible that they would never cross paths again. And Yi Shiwen's strength even made the withered old man's expression change slightly. He had thought that with his strength at the peak of the sage plane, it would be absolutely easy to deal with a junior. He never expected that this junior would have so many trump cards and would not be so easy to deal with. Yi Shiwen's sword dragon grew larger and larger. It roared continuously and swept across, causing the entire divine kingdom to tremble. Cracks appeared, and countless rotten corpses and vengeful spirits all collapsed in an instant. It had completely exceeded his expectations. Although the entire divine kingdom was quickly repaired under the withered old man's management, this was not a very good sign. At the very least, the divine kingdom alone could not suppress Yi Shiwen. He immediately decided to attack directly. He turned his palm over, and instantly a ritual implement appeared in his hand. It was a powerful bone blade that was entwined with an endless aura of decay. Countless decaying rules were entwined on the bone blade, flying up and down, directly tearing the sky. Those decaying rules were like saw teeth, covering the bone blade, and then it directly slashed down towards Yi Shiwen. Walalala! Wherever the bone blade passed, the sky shattered into a black crack, spreading towards Yi Shiwen fiercely, followed by a shocking blade aura. The terrible decaying blade aura spread out, causing the entire book mountain to tremble. Countless matrices were instantly stimulated, and for a moment, the entire book mountain was in an uproar. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Yi Shiwen. Although they had long been prepared, when they saw the blade for real, everyone could not help but hold their breath. That blade was too shocking, and the withered old man was completely enraged by Yi Shiwen. He was not like when he fought with Gu Shiring before, where he still held back. Chapter 2578. With this slash, I'll turn you into rot. The withered old man grinned. Gods themselves were immortal existences. The nature of decay would never appear on a god. However, this slash actually wanted to make the indestructible god fall into decay. One could imagine how powerful it was. In an instant, a huge cage appeared in the sky. The blade directly chopped down on Yi Shiwen's body. The decaying aura gushed out and submerged Yi Shiwen's entire body. The decaying blade emitted a tyrannical aura and spread out. The withered old man revealed an ugly and sinister smile. He was very clear about how terrifying his slash was. Even those peerless evildoers would be flustered if they were accidentally hit by his slash. Not to mention a mere junior who wanted to challenge him. He was simply courting death. It was also a high-grade divine tool, but the decaying blade was more powerful. How could this be? Yi Shiwen didn't even dodge and was directly slashed. He's dead for sure, someone exclaimed. Although they weren't facing the terror of this slash, they could feel it. If they were in Yi Shiwen's shoes, this slash would be enough to kill them instantly. Do it! Interrupt his casting. Gu Shiying's eyes were red as she gritted her teeth and yelled. If this old thing killed Yi Shiwen, then the rest of them would be in trouble. This old thing was obviously crazy. He even dared to kill these Confucian disciples. If he saved Yi Shiwen, then he would have a powerful helper. Before Gu Shiying could finish speaking, the Confucian sect disciples erupted with a boundless righteous energy. They began to chant the song of righteousness, forming a powerful projection in the sky. This was the projection of the boundless righteous energy, and it was extremely powerful. In an instant, thousands of laws condensed in the hands of the phantom and formed a torrent that blasted towards the withered old man. You want to fight me with just you? The withered old man grinned. The decaying blade continued to crush Yi Shiwen. However, on the other side, his big hand directly grabbed out. The torrent of overwhelming righteousness was directly grabbed by him. It couldn't get close to him at all. On the contrary, he actually launched a counterattack. His decaying aura turned into countless rotten corpses and malicious spirits that rushed out and rushed towards the Confucian disciples. Even the people who weren't disciples of the Confucian school were completely dumbfounded. This was the power of the senior generation. Ignoring the king-level experts and freakishly talented geniuses, this was the peak fighting prowess of the old-timers, and was the most common type. The withered old man wasn't one of those monstrous geniuses, but he was already able to single-handedly fight against so many people. The Confucian disciples actually couldn't do anything to him. It should be known that the martial arts of the Confucian disciples were also well known in the heavens and the myriad realms. They were even more powerful when they joined forces, and with outstanding disciples like Gu Shiying and Yin Bai presiding over them, they still couldn't do anything to the withered old man. At this time, Yin Bai also directly attacked. As soon as he attacked, he directly used the spring and autumn brush to write the word thunder in the void. This word instantly turned into a torrent of thunder and lightning in the void. It directly crashed down and formed a torrent of thunder that blasted towards the withered old man. Yin Bai was very clear that the withered old man cultivated the laws of the dark side, so he was most afraid of the thunder attribute laws. Although he didn't cultivate the thunder attribute laws, he could use the spring and autumn brush to write it, which was an extremely powerful magical power. And Gu Shiying also used the spring and autumn brush to point out countless ancient characters in the sky. This was an ancient divine text that was in accordance with the Great Tao. Just the written characters alone were incomparably powerful, and they also fell like raindrops. Together with Yin Bai, they directly attacked the withered old man. It's a pity. If it was a great scholar of the same realm as me, he might be able to restrain me. But with just you two kids, you're still far from it. The withered old man grinned, but he was not afraid of the attacks of these two people at all. His body constantly spewed out the aura of decay, and he faced the attacks of the two people. Rumble! The attacks of both sides collided in the sky continuously, forming a huge vortex that swept out. Not only did the divine kingdom that the withered old man spread out not reduce, but it continued to expand, forming a decaying hell. The disciples of the other sects retreated because even Book Mountain was not safe. Under Gu Shiying's control, many of the arrays on Book Mountain were also activated, rushing towards the withered old man. At this time, they only understood how terrifying the withered old man was. Correspondingly, Yi Shiwen, who was able to fight against him just now, was probably also ridiculously strong. But there was no point in saying this now. Yi Shiwen was cut by the decaying blade, and it was only a matter of time before he died. Damn it! Gu Shiying was furious, but it was of no use at all. Even if they joined forces, they could not break in. Even if most of the withered old man's power was used on Yi Shiwen, the remaining power was enough to block their joint attack. No one can save him today. and neither can you. When I kill him, all of you will die." The withered old man laughed wildly. His eyes were red, and his rationality had been completely swallowed up. He had been angered to death by Yi Shiwen several times. "Can't save me? I don't need anyone to save me at all." At this time, a sword light suddenly slashed out from the aura of decay. In an instant, it broke the aura of decay that the withered old man had added to his body. It could not do anything to Yi Shiwen at all. "Yi Shiwen, you're fine?" Yan Bai said in shock. Although this was the ending he wanted to see the most, it was still completely unbelievable when he saw it for himself. What a joke. Even when they joined forces, they could not do anything to the withered old man. Yi Shiwen actually took the attack unscathed. Yi Shiwen's body spewed out more and more sword lights, like a tornado, sweeping away the aura of decay. All of a sudden, it disappeared completely. At this time, everyone finally saw that when the blade slashed down, it was actually caught by Yi Shiwen. Moreover, he caught the blade of decay with his bare hands. The aura of decay emitted by the blade of decay could not even break the divine power on the surface of Yi Shiwen's body. It could only linger outside. All of a sudden, everyone was dumbfounded. This was already beyond the limit of their understanding. Could a person use his body to resist a high-grade divine tool? How was this possible? He was simply a monster. Boom! On Yi Shiwen's body, the infinite sword energy exploded, and the rotten blade that had slashed on Yi Shiwen's body began to show signs of fragmentation, and cracks began to appear. "Ah!" The withered old man roared in pain. He did not know how long his blade of decay had been refined and how many materials he had collected for tens of thousands of years to finally be refined. Now, there were actually cracks on it. Just one crack was enough to make him die of heartache, let alone so many. He quickly retracted the blade of decay. His reaction was extremely fast, and he withdrew it like lightning. His eyes were also filled with disbelief. Why did his decaying laws have no effect on Yi Shiwen? Even if they were both at the peak of the sage realm, he was confident that it would have a great effect. If directly hit, even a sage realm divine master would be corroded and decomposed. Yi Shiwen had actually taken it unscathed. "You want to leave now? It's a little too late." Yi Shiwen shouted and took a step forward. His figure rushed towards the withered old man like lightning, and he actually launched a counterattack. The withered old man's divine kingdom of decay could not stop him at all. It could not even make him pause. What was even more strange was that the decaying laws actually moved aside, making a path for Yi Shiwen. It was as if Yi Shiwen was also the master of the decaying laws. If anyone were to pay attention, they would notice that the decaying laws were also emerging from Yi Shiwen's body, causing the decaying laws of the withered old man's divine kingdom to be unable to affect him. In that short period of time, he had used the mysterious space to break down the withered old man's laws. Although it could not be said that he had completely understood them, the withered old man's decaying laws had no effect on him. Otherwise, he would not have delayed for so long. All of this was because the withered old man was too confident in his own strength. He did not care at all whether Yi Shiwen was really suppressed or whether he really had no power to fight back. If he had paid attention in advance, Yi Shiwen would not have been able to comprehend the decaying laws to a certain degree so smoothly. The withered old man was immediately furious. He was also forced into a desperate situation. Naturally, he was even more unwilling to admit defeat. The muscles on his body were trembling. Half of them were decaying, and the other half were withered. He looked extremely ferocious. Every trace and every wisp of the decaying energy that erupted from his body was like the birth of a world, crushing over. It was extremely corrosive. As long as an ordinary person got close, their whole body would quickly decay. Even the gods could not avoid it. Boom! Yi Shiwen blasted out with his sword, but it directly blasted into the decaying energy. It did not directly attack the withered old man. This attack happened in the blink of an eye. Although it did not hit the withered old man, it still completely shocked him. If he had moved a little slower, he would have been stabbed by Yi Shiwen's sword. If that happened, the consequences would be unimaginable. At this time, everyone reacted. Just when everyone was still in a daze, Yi Shiwen had already launched a wave of attacks. Roar! The withered old man roared again and again because the first wave of attacks had just ended, and Yi Shiwen's next wave of attacks had already arrived. Yi Shiwen did not give him a chance to breathe at all. He wanted to kill him alive. Chapter 2579. In his opinion, Yi Shiwen was simply going too far in bullying others. But Yi Shiwen did not care what he thought. He slammed down with the sky-turning seal again. Suddenly, the world seemed to be turned upside down, and the powerful energy formed fell on the withered old man. Bang! The withered old man clenched his teeth and forcefully endured it. However, he suddenly discovered that this power far exceeded the limits of what he could endure. His entire body was instantly sent flying out of Book Mountain like a meteor. Blood splattered all over the mountain. Damn, that's too brutal, Yanbai said, dumbfounded. He had already felt how terrifying the withered old man was when they fought just now. He was ridiculously strong, but in front of Yi Shiwen, he was no match at all, and was directly blasted away by the sky-turning seal. This was too outrageous. Thinking about it, Yi Shiwen's power was already strong enough to catch the stars and the moon. Just his power alone was already so strong. Thinking of this, many people couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Many people recalled many legends about him. They also understood who this person was through the words of the Confucian disciples. He was actually the so-called number one person among his generation, Yi Shiwen. Now it seemed that he was indeed worthy of the name. After all, even Yin Bai and Gu Shiying could not handle the withered old man together, but he was completely defenseless against Yi Shiwen. Withered old man, this day, next year, will be the anniversary of your death. Yi Shiwen's cold voice came. The withered old man had completely made him want to kill, and he must be eliminated. Anyway, he had already killed Lord Concord. Compared to Lord Concord, the withered old man was stronger, but the two were not on the same level at all. He was just an extra. Yi Shiwen's strength that belonged to the Sage Realm middle stage completely broke out, and his whole body was spitting out sword chi, forming a sword dragon, and instantly shot out in midair, blasting at the withered old man. The withered old man had just taken a blow from the sky-turning seal, and before he could completely cleanse the power of the sky-turning seal, he was suddenly attacked by the power of the sword dragon. Immediately, his injuries worsened, and he spat out a mouthful of blood, half of his body shattered. The entire scene was incomparably tragic. The withered old man spat out blood, dyeing half the sky red. At this time, the withered old man seemed to have gone mad. He didn't care about Yi Shiwen and directly rushed towards the Confucian disciples. He wanted to take them as hostages so that Yi Shiwen wouldn't be able to harm them. He had been beaten by Yi Shiwen to the point of losing his temper. It should be said that he had been scared to death by Yi Shiwen. It was only a matter of time before such a person would become an evildoer in the future. He was not someone they could compare with. The only thing he could do now was to survive. As for the rest, he didn't even dare to think about it. Oh no, this old man is desperate. He wants to take us hostage. Gu Shiying immediately realized what was going on. The spring and autumn brush appeared in her hand, and she immediately tapped on it. Yen Bai and the rest were not slow to react. They all started to attack. At this moment, they did not dare to hold back at all. Encountering such a desperate person, if they really let him succeed, then they would really be crying blind. Although Gu Shiying and Yen Bai were not as strong as Yi Shiwen, they were still the strongest among these people. They were not weak. They used various means to resist. The overwhelming righteousness formed a huge phantom, wrapping the entire Book Mountain in it. They were also very clear that this was the last moment. As long as they could withstand the old man's desperate actions, they would be safe, and this would be the end. However, they still underestimated the madness of the withered old man when he was forced to a dead end. He was already burning his life. Even if the aftereffects were serious, he could not care less. Countless decaying auras gushed out and directly exploded the figure condensed by the overwhelming righteousness. Puff, puff. The entire overwhelming righteousness was condensed by them. Now that it was shattered, the Confucian disciples suffered a backlash, especially Gu, Shuriying, and Yanbai. They were directly hit by a powerful force, and they were sent flying backward while spitting out a mouthful of blood. The withered old man was completely crazy. He directly formed a big skinny hand, and with his injured body, he directly grabbed towards the two. These two people were his real targets. The others were too weak to deter Yi Shiwen. In his opinion, only these two people could do the job. Die! Just when the withered old man was about to succeed, he saw Yi Shiwen catching up from behind. Yi Shiwen directly caught up with him, and a Hantan seal turned into an archaic divine mountain, smashing down. Boom! The withered old man screamed, and was directly hit by the archaic divine mountain. His whole body began to crack, and a large amount of blood splashed out. Most of his body had been completely shattered, and there was no time to repair it. In other words, Yi Shiwen would not give him the time to repair it all. The withered old man directly smashed a huge pit on the ground. Even if he burned his life, it seemed to be useless in front of Yi Shiwen. "Are you two okay?" Yi Shiwen asked. We're fine. The two of them hurriedly said, looking as if they had just survived a disaster. Just now, the withered old man had been too crazy. Even with their willpower, they had been frightened. It could be imagined just how dangerous the situation had been. Fortunately, at the last moment, Yi Shiwen arrived, and they did not end up in the withered old man's hands. Although they were a little injured, it was actually not a big deal. Suddenly, a light flashed through the void, and the withered old man used the last bit of his strength to escape. This was his last hope now, and he did not even dare to think about any rewards. What a joke, this was not a human at all, but a monster. How could a normal person take revenge on a monster? Want to leave? Isn't this a little too late? Yi Shiwen sneered, and in his hand, the demon summoning banner suddenly flew out, instantly turning into a bloody mouth, and swallowed the withered old man. The essence and blood of a master at the peak of the Sage Plane, as well as Mr. Hawan's master of the late Sage Plane, fell into the demon summoning banner, causing a commotion among countless monsters, and they began to frantically fight for the essence and blood that fell. A large wave of monsters completed their transformation in an instant, and there was even a demon king who, after devouring a large amount of essence and blood, had truly stepped from the late Sage Plane to the peak of the Sage Plane. It was an ancient water ape, and this violent ape was very powerful. It was also a clone of a very powerful demon king's will. In addition, there were more than a dozen demon kings who had also reached the point of transformation, and were about to step into the peak of the Sage Plane. There were also many monsters who had completed the most important transformation, and their power had stepped into the Sage Plane from the Eternal Plane in one fell swoop. There were even more who had stepped into the Eternal Plane from the Eternal Plane. Although these monsters did not have physical bodies, and were only the primordial spirits of those great monsters, and were basically the weakest among those of the same plane, but there were many of them, and there were many of them. Sooner or later, a quantitative change would also lead to a qualitative change. In addition, the biggest gain was the wealth of Mr. Huan and the withered old man added together. There were more than 10 billion divine source, especially Mr. Huan, who actually had more than the withered old man. He was simply a spendthrift. Compared to him, Yi Shiwen was nothing at all. But now, all of it was Yi Shiwen's. He could use it to feed the demon kings, and he could also use it to feed the golden-backed dragon carp king. It was only one step away from completing its transformation. When that time came, it would gain many years of power, and it would help Yi Shiwen reach the heavens in a single step. Yi Shiwen was still counting the gains from this battle, and everyone was still in a state of shock. This was completely different from what they had imagined. The withered old man, whom they could not defeat even when working together, had been destroyed by Yi Shiwen alone. Compared to this, the matter of Yi Shiwen killing Mr. Huan was nothing at all. It was nothing more than a cruel and merciless act. Everyone in the Hidden Valley in particular began to worry. Divine King He Huan would definitely not let this matter rest. If he caused a ruckus, it would be troublesome. However, What they did not know was that Zhang Yin of the Battle Saint family had also died in his hands. Otherwise, the Hidden Valley would probably collapse. The thoughts of the disciples of the Confucian sect were even simpler. Yi Shiwen was a helper they had invited. The stronger Yi Shiwen was, the more benefits they could obtain. Most importantly, the spring and autumn brush should not fall into the hands of others. And the thoughts of the others were similar. With such a great demon as an opponent, one would definitely be depressed to the point of wanting to die. But if this great demon was on their side, then the situation would be completely different. After Yi Shiwen took a clear inventory, he landed and entered the mountain of books, looking at Gu Shiring and Yan Bai. "Are the two of you okay?" Yi Shiwen asked. He was a little embarrassed. Just now, it was more or less because of his lack of consideration that caused the withered old man to go crazy. "It's okay. It's not a big deal." Gu Shiring shook her head. Just now, both of them had already taken the elixir. This bit of impact would quickly recover, and it would not affect their future snatching of the spring and autumn brush. Yi Shiwen this time, I, Yan Bai, am completely convinced. In the future, if anyone dares to say that you are not the number one person in this generation, I will be the first to blow his head off, Yan Bai said as he gave a thumbs up. Obviously, he was completely convinced by Yi Shiwen's strength. Even Gu Shiring had nothing to say about this. At least for now, he was definitely not Yi Shiwen's opponent. Chapter 2580. Normally, Gu Shiring would have been dejected, but at this moment he was not. The reason was simple. For him, there was nothing more important than obtaining the spring and autumn brush, and Yi Shiwen would be his greatest guarantee for obtaining the spring and autumn brush. With such an ally, what was there to be afraid of? In this operation, perhaps not every decision he made was correct, but his decision to invite Yi Shiwen was definitely the best one. But at the same time, he could not help but feel a little unreconciled. For their generation, cultivation had only just begun, and a momentary victory or defeat did not mean anything. After being disturbed by two mad dogs, I still don't know to what extent the situation has developed. Yi Shiwen asked. Everyone was left speechless. Yi Shiwen really has a big heart. After experiencing such a battle, he can still calmly ask about the situation. How much has the situation developed? Those two were high and mighty figures in the eyes of others, but to him, they were just two mad dogs. In comparison, the gap between the two sides was really huge. We were the first to arrive here, so don't worry, Gu Shiring said. But because of this, he didn't know what kind of people would come later. Yi Shiwen breathed a sigh of relief. At least he was not late. Since it hadn't started yet, everyone began to meditate. Although the battle this time was intense and soul-stirring, it was actually quite beneficial to them. That was because it wasn't every day that they got to see such a high-level battle. For them, this was also a very rare experience. Now, they could digest it for a long time. This was also the most precious treasure they could obtain in a very long time. It was even more valuable than many heavenly treasures. After all, treasures of heaven and earth were easy to find, and such a battle was not something that could be seen every day. This was also the reason why many people were willing to watch a battle between experts. It was not only to satisfy their curiosity, but more importantly, they could also learn a lot of experience from it. Such a battle even had a lot of meaning for Yi Shiwen himself. After all, this was the first time he had truly relied on his own strength to defeat someone at the pinnacle of the Sage Plane. Previously, he had merely relied on the terrifying might of the Sword of Avicii to sweep through, and the comprehension he gained at this moment could not even be mentioned in the same breath. On Book Mountain, there was a cliff waterfall. Mu Yunxi and Yi Shiwen stood side by side. The two had not seen each other for more than 1,000 years, and they felt very close at this moment. Junior brother Yi, we haven't seen each other for more than 1,000 years. I didn't expect you to have improved to such a level. Congratulations. Mu Yunxi broke the silence first. Senior sister, you've improved a lot too. I'm a little surprised to see you here today. Yi Shiwen said. In the Kurfürst Road, even sages had fallen in large numbers, let alone immortals. There was no guarantee at all. They might be powerful in the outside world, but here they were nothing at all. I understand what junior brother Yi means, but as the saying goes, snakes have their ways, and rats have their ways. Junior brother Yi, you must have entered the Kerfur's Road for the legendary opportunity to become an emperor, and we are just looking for further opportunities. After all, not everyone can be like junior brother Yi and leave us far behind in just 1,000 years or so. Generally speaking, there won't be any big shots looking for trouble with us. Mu Yinshi said with a sweet smile. These words seemed to be said to Yi Shiwen, but also to herself. As she said this, she suddenly felt that the knot in her heart had been let go, and she felt a lot more relaxed. She only felt that everything was clear in front of her. Mu Yinshi's body suddenly shone brightly. Above her head, an auspicious cloud rose, and many magic treasures were displayed on it, shining brightly. Seeing this scene, how could Yi Shiwen not understand that Mu Yunshi had obtained a great opportunity? She had actually seen through some kind of obsession, and her state of mind had improved greatly. She was already at the peak of the immortal's realm, and one more step, and she would be at the eternal realm. To cross a big realm, this was a great opportunity that many gods might not encounter in their lifetime. How many people were stuck at the peak of the immortal's realm for their whole lives? From proving the way to dying, they had never really crossed this realm. In the sky, there was a tribulation cloud. Congratulations, senior sister. Congratulations, Yi Shiwen said with a slight smile. This time, I really have to thank junior brother Yi. Mu Yinshi looked at Yi Shiwen and said seriously. Only she knew best that she had let go of her obsession with Yi Shiwen. She felt that the two of them were already not at the same level. Without the obsession, she could only have such a clear and bright mind. Even for more than 1,000 years, she could have such gratifying progress because of her obsession with Yi Shiwen. She hoped to be able to catch up with his footsteps. This obsession made her progress obvious in the beginning, but it soon became her obstacle. If she could not see through it herself, she might not be able to cross it in this life. Now that she had really let go of it, her mind was bright, and it coincided with the heavenly way. Her cultivation had advanced instead. She had the obsession because of Yi Shiwen, and she had let go of it because of Yi Shiwen. As the saying goes, everything is determined by heaven, and the world is unpredictable. After Mu Yinshi finished speaking, she did not say anything more. She directly flew into the tribulation cloud and began to cross the tribulation in front of everyone. Everyone on the Book Mountain was shocked. They naturally didn't know that there were so many twists and turns. For them, they only thought that after watching the battle between Yi Shiwen and the withered old man, they had directly broken through a big realm. Many people could not help but feel a little envious. They had also watched the battle, but why did they not directly advance? Although they had a lot of gains, it was obvious that there was still a big gap compared to Mu Yunshi. Even for the gods, there was still a clear distinction between the levels. For the gods, every big realm was a transformation and rebirth. The eternal realm could only be considered ordinary, but after reaching the eternal realm, the status was immediately different. Their status was raised by a notch, and they immediately jumped to another level. They were small nobles among the gods. The sage realm was the big nobles among the gods, and the king powerhouses were the supreme rulers. Yi Shiwen looked at the figure of Mu Yunshi, who had disappeared into the heavens tribulation, and could not help but sigh. In fact, how could he not know what Mu Yunshi was thinking? But he was already in enough emotional debt. Even if his heart was as clear as a mirror, he could only pretend that he did not understand. Mu Yunshi's tribulation completely aroused the enthusiasm of everyone on Book Mountain. Soon, everyone found that Yi Shiwen was not as cold and unreasonable as they had imagined, so they came to ask for advice before the battle began. Yi Shiwen did not refuse any of them. Preaching was not only beneficial to them, but it was also beneficial to Yi Shiwen. This was a process of constantly sorting out one's understanding of the Great Tao. He could also gain a clearer understanding of it. Later, Gu Shiring and Yin Bai also joined in. The level of the others was too far apart, so they could not discuss with Yi Shiwen at all. Only he could preach. However, after Gu Shiring and Yin Bai joined in, the situation was completely different. Speaking of which, in terms of realm alone, the two of them were one level higher than Yi Shiwen. In particular, they brought with them the unique cultivation philosophy of the Confucian sect, which made Yi Shiwen feel that he had gained a lot. The laws of the three people's preaching turned into golden lotuses that descended from the sky. Everyone listened with rapt attention, and they learned a lot. The three people who were preaching also learned a lot in their own ways. On this day, Yi Shiwen and the others, who had been preaching for a full 10 days, finally welcomed the arrival of others. Moreover, they were also powerful experts. Look, that's the indefinite god cult's indefinite sacred mountain. What a powerful force. It's actually sweeping over. A cry of surprise woke everyone from the preaching environment. At this time, they finally remembered that the battle was not over yet. Everyone looked over and saw that it was the indefinite god cult's very famous instrument, the indefinite sacred mountain. Originally, the people that the Confucian sects had invited to help were a little nervous about their future prospects. After all, although the Confucian sects were powerful, the indefinite shrine cult wasn't a force to be trifled with. Unfortunately, their strength wasn't all that great either, so they could only serve as a distraction. But now, they no longer had the slightest worry. The reason was simple. Yi Shiwen was here, so what else did they have to worry about? No matter how strong the experts of the indefinite sacred mountain were, could they be stronger than the withered old man? However, the power of the indefinite sacred mountain sweeping over still made them gasp in surprise. Yi Shiwen and the others stood up one after another, their expressions solemn, especially Gu Shiying. No matter how much preparation she had made in advance, she still did not dare to underestimate the other party when it came to a real battle. It's finally here. Indefinite sacred mountain, indefinite god cult, Wu Dingzi. Is he the one who formed an alliance with Jun Dingtian? Yi Shiwen said plainly. Every move of a person of this level was extremely eye-catching. Jun Dingtian and the others could easily detect the alliance between Yi Shiwen and Gu Shiying. In turn, Gu Shiying could easily detect the alliance between Jun Dingtian and Wu Dingzi. Junior, when the battle starts, you will be in charge of controlling Book Mountain and suppressing the opponent's indefinite sacred mountain. As for the charge, just leave it to me and Brother Yi. Gu Shiying said. Book Mountain was his base camp, so he needed someone he could trust to oversee it. No problem. Yan Bai nodded. He had already taken the control seal from Gu Shiying's hands. Yi Shiwen's eyes were incomparably deep. After opening the Eye of Redemption, he looked at the indefinite sacred mountain. Strong auras rose from it, but he did not find Jun Dingtian's aura. There was a strong aura on the indefinite sacred mountain, but it was not Jun Dingtian's. It should be Wu Dingzi of the indefinite god cult. Wu Dingzi, how dare your indefinite god cult come and steal our spring and autumn brush? Retreat now. Gu Shiying stepped forward and scolded. Chapter 2581. Wu Dingzi's figure appeared at the peak of the indestructible sacred mountain. He coldly looked at Gu Shiying, who was on the opposite side of the Book Mountain. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back. As the saying goes, treasures belong to those who are capable. If the spring and autumn brush was lying in your Confucian sect, I wouldn't have any ideas. But now that it has wandered outside, it means that the fate between you and the spring and autumn brush has come to an end. In that case, why don't you let it go as soon as possible? Wu Dingzi stood with his hands clasped behind his back. There was a playful smile on his face. Shameless, shameless. Many disciples of the Confucian sect were furious. If the spring and autumn brush was in the Confucian sect, Wu Dingzi wouldn't have dared to snatch it. In that case, let's rely on our own means. Don't blame us if you die here. Gu Shiying threatened coldly. Ha ha ha! Wu Dingzi laughed loudly. His expression was a little cold. This isn't the first time I've heard such words, but they didn't have a good ending. Brother Gu, there's no need to talk nonsense with him. No matter how many people cause trouble, just defeat them all. Yi Shiwen said. Brother Yi, do you mean that you want to stop them by yourself? Gu Shiying asked in surprise. Even he didn't expect that Yi Shiwen would have such a plan. If it was before, he definitely wouldn't have believed that Yi Shiwen had this ability. But now it was hard to say. He had seen how Yi Shiwen had defeated the withered old man. Otherwise, we will all be stopped. Why bother? Yi Shiwen said, since it's an alliance, I naturally have to show my sincerity. Brother Yi is right. Since it's an alliance, we naturally have to show our sincerity. Gu Shiring gritted his teeth. He flipped his palm and took out an incomparably bright, colorful ball from the void. This ball exuded a vast amount of righteousness and condensed into a ball. This is the reward for Brother Ye's help this time. Could it be that only a great Confucian can condense the Wengal? Yi Shiwen was slightly surprised and said. He was now considered to be experienced and knowledgeable, although he had never seen the Wenbile, but he had read about the introduction of the Confucian school's Wenbile from the literature, so he quickly recognized it. The cultivators of the Confucian sect took a different path, opening up an independent cultivation path, using literature to enter the Tao. Hence, the experts of the Confucian sect were often great scholars with soaring literary talent. The Confucians didn't cultivate golden cores or nascent souls. They only cultivated the gallbladder. The gallbladder was the essence of their cultivation. But when a Confucian disciple died, their gallbladder would dissipate into the world and return to the world. This was in line with the Confucian sect's philosophy of not killing the goose that lays the golden eggs to catch the fish. But there were also extremely rare circumstances where a Confucian martial artist would be able to leave behind a writing gall after they died. This Wendan was the complete essence of a powerful Confucian martial artist. It was easy to imagine how precious it was. As for the one in Gu Shiring's hand, it was probably not simple either. Looking at the nomological laws covering it, it gave off a feeling that made one tremble with fear. This is the gallbladder left behind by a senior of our Confucian sect who was comparable to a monster. Gu Shiring said. Yi Shiwen immediately understood that this was actually the gallbladder left behind by an antique that was comparable to a monster. What kind of people were those who could be called monstrous geniuses? They were practically the strongest people below the king level. Although the withered old man was powerful, there was still a huge gap between him and those monstrous geniuses. Even the current Yi Shiwen was still far from those monstrous geniuses. However, if he was able to consume a bile of such a level, then it probably wouldn't take long for him to reach the peak of the middle stage of the sage plane. At that time, he would even be able to fight against those monstrous geniuses. Originally, the successive breakthroughs in a short period of time had consumed all of his accumulations, and he didn't have enough comprehension of the realm. But if he could have a gallbladder of this level, it would be completely different. Not only did the gallbladder contain the lifelong skills of a great Confucian of the Confucian sect, but most importantly, it also contained a lot of understanding and comprehension of martial arts. Although there were no Confucian martial arts in it, the comprehension of martial arts was currently the most important thing for Yi Shiwen. In this way, it could save Yi Shiwen a lot of time. This level of gallbladder was probably very precious even within the Confucian sect. The only thing more precious than this kind of gallbladder was the gallbladder left behind by a titled King Confucian after he died. But in the Confucian sect since ancient times, including those who had died, the number of people who could cultivate to the Confucian king realm could be counted on two hands. And it just so happened that the gallbladder was left behind by a technical school. So it was very likely that there was no Confucian king level gallbladder in the Confucian sect. This should be the highest level of gallbladder. If this was just sincerity, then Gu Shiring was too sincere. Yi Shiwen looked at Gu Shiring and didn't know what he was thinking. He said, "This is a bit too precious. Brother Yi, you don't have to be so polite. Brother Yi is right. Since this is an alliance, we must show our sincerity. This gallbladder may look precious, but there is still a huge gap between it and the spring and autumn brush. Brother Yi, you helped me obtain the spring and autumn brush. Isn't this worth more than this gallbladder?" Gu Shiring said calmly. Although he was somewhat reluctant, he had already decided to use the gallbladder to express his sincerity, so he had no regrets. An alliance could only be achieved when both sides needed each other and were equal. If it was only one-sided demands or one-sided contributions, it would be difficult to sustain such a fragile alliance. The current situation was that Yi Shiwen's contributions were greater than the returns. Gu Shiring needed Yi Shiwen's help, and a mere piece of information from Jun Dingtian was probably far from enough. Everything would be different if this gallbladder was taken into account. Both sides would be a win-win alliance. This way, the alliance would be able to last for a long time in the future. Although this was the first time he had teamed up with Yi Shiwen, Gu Shiring had already thought about the next time, and the time after that, and the time after that when the Kerfus Road opened. Since Brother Gu has said so, then I won't be pretentious. I really need this gallbladder. Yi Shiwen nodded. After accepting this gallbladder, the alliance between both sides became more stable, especially for Yi Shiwen. This gallbladder had solved his urgent problem. Originally, he had expected that it would still take hundreds of years to consolidate. After all, the accumulation of martial arts couldn't be faked at all. It had to be accumulated bit by bit. It was only normal for a deity to cultivate for 10,000 years for one step. Now that he had this gallbladder, he could shorten the time by several times and truly push his cultivation to the point where he could challenge those monstrous geniuses. This was many times faster than he had expected before he entered the Kerfus Road. No wonder so many people wanted to enter the Kerfus Road. The opportunities within were not something that the outside world could imagine. Apart from these two forces, many other experts had also appeared. However, they were only rogue cultivators. Compared to these two forces, there was still a huge gap. They could only be regarded as scraps. In reality, they didn't have the ability to compete with the two forces. They could only be regarded as bystanders. The ones who were most likely to obtain the spring and autumn brush in the end were only the indefinite shrine cult or the Confucian sect. Both sides were eyeing each other covetously. They didn't want to fight each other before the ruins were opened, and it would only benefit others in the end. Suddenly, an incomparably huge burst of light came from the void. It was an overwhelming righteous aura. Everyone's spirits were lifted. The ruins were about to open, and in these ruins, a monstrous genius of the Confucian sect had fallen. If it weren't for the fact that he was a supreme genius of the Confucian sect wouldn't have given him such a precious treasure to use. In the end, it even accompanied his death, landing in these ruins. It's opening. Gu Shiring's entire body trembled. Even he, who was usually calm, couldn't remain calm at this time. The countless schemes he had plotted before were finally going to see the light of day. This time he couldn't afford to fail. If he succeeded, then his status in the Confucian sect would soar by leaps and bounds. On top of that, he would become the new master of the spring and autumn brush. When that time came, aside from the Confucian king, no one would be able to surpass him. However, if he failed, then he wouldn't just lose the spring and autumn brush. He would also become a sinner of the Confucian sect. If a supreme-grade divine tool like the spring and autumn brush ended up in the hands of the indefinite shrine cult, it would be very difficult for the Confucian sect to get it back. Saying that it originally belonged to the Confucian sect was just a baseless claim. However, it was impossible for the indefinite shrine cult to give up on it. As such, success or failure hinged on this one move. He could only fight with everything he had. Boundless righteous aura was released from the top of Book Mountain. Countless formations were activated, and they were ready for battle. It was the same for the indestructible God Mountain on the other side. Countless matrices were activated one after another. Mana rippled, and the galaxy lost its color at this moment. It looked incomparably dim, and the space around it was trembling violently. "Do it!" someone shouted. Countless formations on Book Mountain spat out blazing torrents of energy, which blasted towards the indefinite shrine cult on the other side. At the same time, many disciples of the Confucian sect and the experts they had invited to help flew up. In an instant, the entire place seemed to have turned into an ancient battlefield. War flags fluttered in the middle of the battlefield, and it looked like a golden army. Boundless magical power rippled in an instant. This was a battle of gods, and it was no ordinary battle. It was like a battle of the gods at dusk. Chapter 2582. The battle between the two of them involved hundreds and thousands of gods. Indeed, it could be considered as the twilight of the gods. It was beyond the limits of what ordinary people could imagine. Even the weakest immortal level had a power that was far beyond what ordinary people could imagine. Not to mention the immortal level and even the sage level that were above the immortal level. They were existences that had completely transcended the mortal world. "Brother Yi, it's our turn now." Gu Shiring gritted his teeth as he stared at the ruins. He had paid a huge price, and now it was time to reap the rewards. He took a step forward and rushed into the ruins. Everyone knew that it was time to see who was faster. If they were any slower, they would be left behind and would not even be able to get any scraps. At the same time, a figure flew out from indestructible Sacred Mountain. He swept down with an endless aura of disaster and destruction towards Gu Shiring. However, Gu Shiring didn't care at all. She directly charged towards the ruins. A barrier had appeared above the ruins. If Gu Shiring wanted to break through, she would first have to open this barrier. Fortunately, this barrier had been left behind by that freak from the Confucian sect. They were both methods of the Confucian sect, and he only needed a bit of time to undo it. It was impossible to forcefully break it open with external force. After all, although Gu Shiring's cultivation was extremely high, there was still a huge gap between her and that monster from back then. Just as the disaster chi was about to fall on Gu Shiring, a big hand suddenly appeared from the void and grabbed it. It actually grabbed the disaster chi and turned it into nothing. Wu Dingzi was furious and shouted, "Yi Shiwen!" Although he had never seen Yi Shiwen before, who else would dare to attack at this time and had the ability to do so other than Yi Shiwen? Yi Shiwen didn't continue to hide. Instead, he directly appeared in midair. Behind him, a blood-colored barrier appeared in midair, blocking everyone's path forward. Wu Dingzi's expression was ugly. The spring and autumn brush was his biggest goal, and he was determined to get it. Now that Yi Shiwen dared to block his way, he was simply courting death. "Yi Shiwen, do you want to stop everyone?" Wu Dingzi said coldly. However, he didn't bat an eyelid as he added more people into the mix. If those rogue cultivators were scattered, they might not be a big deal to the indestructible Sacred Mountain and the Confucian sect. However, if they joined forces, they would be a much larger force than the indestructible Sacred Mountain and the Confucian sect. Wu Dingzi was using a borrowed knife to kill. After all, the disciples of the indefinite shrine cult and the helpers they had invited were currently being held back by the disciples of the Confucian sect. They did not have the upper hand at all. It would be best if they could lure the rogue cultivators over at this time. Sure enough, everyone looked at Yi Shiwen in a rather unfriendly manner. The Heavenly Amen sect was aware that the probability of them seizing the spring and autumn brush was very low. However, the spring and autumn brush wasn't the only thing in these ruins. There were many other treasures that had been left behind. Furthermore, the probability of them seizing the spring and autumn brush was rather low, but it wasn't impossible. If they were to be knocked unconscious or get lucky, it wasn't impossible for them to immediately explode with power. If that was the case, wouldn't they have struck it rich? How could they not be furious when they thought of this? Yi Shiwen sneered. If it had been anyone else, they would have scrambled to explain themselves. After all, it wasn't good to offend the crowd. However, he had nothing to fear now. In a battle of this level, numbers no longer meant anything to him. Unless these people were old fogies at the pinnacle of the sage realm, then he might actually retreat. However, it was impossible for these agitated rogue cultivators to scare Yi Shiwen away. Wu Dingzi, everyone knows what your goal is, so cut the crap. Don't even think about getting past us. Yi Shiwen said coldly. His countenance didn't change in the slightest. They wanted to rely on their numerical advantage to threaten him? That was simply impossible. How arrogant of you! Wu Dingzi was so angry that he laughed. He knew that if he couldn't defeat Yi Shiwen, then the probability of getting past them today was too low. Thinking of this, Wu Dingzi's body moved suddenly. He tore the space apart and rushed in front of Yi Shiwen. In the next moment, his spiritual power spread out, and the divine kingdom expanded, turning into a world full of disasters. The way of heaven was unpredictable. Everything disappeared. At this moment, Everyone only saw Wu Dingxi's indefinite divine kingdom. Die, indefinite elegy! With a loud roar, he punched out, and a terrifying fist intent spread out. Under the effect of the divine kingdom, his indefinite requiem was expanded to the maximum. It was as if all kinds of sorrowful voices could be heard in the world, all crying. The heavenly Tao in this world was unpredictable, and many people had suffered greatly under the heavenly Tao. Their resentment, their obsession, at this moment, had completely transformed into the fist intent of the indefinite elegy. It was carrying the obsession of billions of creatures. One could imagine how terrifying the indefinite elegy was at this moment. Indefinite elegy? Yi Shiwen instantly felt a kind of mournful aura directly rushing into his mind. It was trying to influence his concept and make him believe in the so-called heaven's way is unpredictable and indefinite. Yi Shiwen also firmly believed in this idea. Every minute and every second, the whole world was changing, but it was simply impossible to defeat him by relying on this fist intention. 6 paths of reincarnation. Everything shall return to dust. The gods shall return to the gods, and hell shall return to hell. Everything shall enter the 6 paths of reincarnation. Yi Shiwen's body slightly swayed, and he blasted a punch. His body underwent a drastic change in an instant. Countless magical powers circulated and flowed within his body. An incomparably huge roulette slowly rose behind him. This roulette carried a chilling and suffocating aura of death and samsara. Yi Shiwen's body shook slightly, and he threw a punch. The 6 paths of reincarnation that Yi Shiwen had blasted out directly suppressed the indefinite divine nation. Although Yi Shiwen had only mastered 2 of the 6 paths of reincarnation, the 6 paths of reincarnation had already been formed, suppressing all directions. Boom! In an instant, the indefinite elegy was smashed into pieces by Yi Shiwen's 6 paths of reincarnation fist. The fist will of both sides were not on the same level. The indefinite elegy was a supreme magical power created by the indefinite king. He was a powerhouse among the kings, but there was a huge gap between him and the Azura demon king, who was at the emperor level. Even if Yi Shiwen had not mastered it completely, any of the fist techniques in the 6 paths of reincarnation fist was not inferior to the indefinite elegy, or even stronger. Even the indefinite divine kingdom was faintly shaking, almost on the verge of collapse. This is the 6 paths of reincarnation fist, the legendary lost technique of the Azura demon king. A terrifying light flashed in Wu Dingxi's eyes. He immediately recognized the fist technique that Yi Shiwen had used. How did you get the true inheritance of this lost technique? It's impossible. It's said that this lost technique has been lost for a long time. Wu Dingxi's eyes were sharp. He could immediately tell that Yi Shiwen had obtained the true inheritance of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. If he only cultivated one of the fist techniques, even if he cultivated it to the extreme, he would not be able to condense the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. At most, it would be a phantom. On the contrary, although Yi Shiwen seemed to have only cultivated 2 of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist, in fact, he could only use it after obtaining the true inheritance. Greed flashed in Wu Dingxi's eyes. If it was only one of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist, he would not have become like this even if he wanted it. However, if it was the complete version of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist, it would be completely different. Even a king-level powerhouse would be tempted. The difference between a king-level martial art and an emperor-level martial art was obvious. The heavens are really on my side today. Wu Dingxi screamed wildly in his heart. He actually got to witness an emperor-level martial art today. He was indeed a destined child. Otherwise, why would the heavens be so kind to him? Cut the crap. Do you want to know how powerful he is? Come and try. Yi Shiwen sneered and did not bother to say anything else. How could he not see the greed in Wu Dingxi's eyes? However, in his opinion, this kind of greed was clearly insane. He was blinded by greed and did not even look at his own strength. Haha, it's my turn to be rich today. Wu Dingxi laughed loudly. His body shook violently, and an extremely powerful calamity aura was released from his body. In fact, this was the essence and mystery of the indefinite sect. Impermanence represented unknown dangers and unforeseen disasters. It was a type of disaster law, and it was obvious that the indefinite spirit cult had cultivated this law to the extreme. Heaven's law is impermanent. In that instant, an endless calamity aura was released. Wherever his fist pressed, it immediately turned into rolling heaven's will. There was an immediate reaction between heaven and earth, as if the direction of heaven's law had been changed in an instant. Yi Shiwen immediately felt that his luck was decreasing sharply. In the secular world, it was said that his glabella was turning black, and there would be a bloody calamity soon. In other words, he was running into bad luck. He was secretly surprised that the indefinite sect could actually change the trajectory of heaven's law. Although it was only for a short period of time, they must have used some special method. Even so, it was already shocking enough. As expected, the indefinite god cult was a sect that was conferred the title of a king. However, it was still too naive to think that they could restrict Yi Shiwen. Chapter 2583. Gods were said to be outside of the three realms and not within the five elements, but that meant that they were not affected by ordinary things. With their strength, ordinary things could not affect them. But as long as they were still under the heavenly way, how could they not be affected? However, this degree of change in the fate of the heavenly way was far from enough to affect him. Yi Shiwen punched out, and the 6 paths of roulette slowly rose behind him, crushing all resistance and colliding with Wu Dingzi's impermanence of heavenly way. Boom! A terrifying collision sound spread out. Both Wu Dingzi's impermanence of heavenly way and Yi Shiwen's 6 paths of reincarnation were extremely terrifying martial arts. It was not something that ordinary people could understand. Countless people could not help but be shocked when they saw this scene. They were not just powerful, they were monsters. In particular, the area where the two were fighting had almost blocked the way forward, not giving others a chance to advance at all. Everyone could only watch as Gu Shiring slowly unraveled the barrier and looked at Yi Shiwen with resentment. However, Yi Shiwen did not care about what they thought. Even if he saw it, he would not care at all. This was nothing to him. Wu Dingzi's attack was not effective. Although it had caused shocking damage, it was still unable to break through the defense that Yi Shiwen had set up. On the contrary, Yi Shiwen's terrifying fist force was pushed back after a series of collisions in the void. He was completely at a disadvantage. However, Yi Shiwen was not affected at all. He stood steadily and did not move. Although Wu Dingzi was one of the best in the late stage of the Sage Realm and was about to break through to the peak of the Sage Realm, he could not gain the upper hand against Yi Shiwen. Wu Dingzi's mana exploded wildly, and he barely managed to drain the force. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt a strong sense of danger. He saw that Yi Shiwen had flown over without him knowing, and was not going to let him go, wanting to kill him. Yi Shiwen unrolled a scroll in his hand, and the power of the 5 elements swept out. Even at their level, the power of the 5 elements was still considered one of the most advanced laws. When Yi Shiwen used it together with the 5 elements Qian Yuan diagram, its power was even more explosive. "How dare you?" Wu Dingzi roared and quickly turned around. Instantly, the endless aura of disaster wrapped around him, and he escaped into the infinite space. Boom! The 5-element Qian Yuan diagram shattered the void, and the disaster chi collapsed under the power of the 5 elements. However, Wu Dingzi still managed to escape. Wu Dingzi couldn't help but break into a cold sweat. Yi Shiwen was not only powerful and difficult to deal with, but his combat experience was also terrifyingly rich. Wu Dingzi was aware that he had experienced mountains of corpses and seas of blood, but this man in front of him seemed to be even more experienced than him. He had only revealed a slight flaw, and he had actually been caught by him. The ability to grasp opportunities like this was simply terrifying. But the situation didn't give him much time. Yi Shiwen's next wave of attack was like a tide. He rolled up the 5 elements Qian Yuan diagram, and the mighty power of the 5 elements formed a huge phantom, constantly attacking Wu Dingzi. Impressive indeed. Yin Bai's body trembled, his face revealing a look of disbelief. Although he was mainly controlling Book Mountain's suppression of indestructible Holy Mountain, he was also paying attention to the battle. He knew very well that the true winner was not on his side. So when he saw this scene, he couldn't help but be shocked. This shock wasn't any less than when Yi Shiwen defeated the Withered Old Man. Moreover, the Withered Old Man wasn't from their generation, so he was much less famous. He was far less eye-catching than Wu Dingzi. Wu Dingzi kept retreating. He hadn't completely adjusted to his peak, but Yi Shiwen wouldn't give him the chance. He was merciless and wouldn't give him any chance at all. Yi Shiwen, you've gone too far, Wu Dingzi roared. He was hit by Yi Shiwen and spat out a mouthful of blood. Of course, he wouldn't feel that he had done anything wrong. For a proud son of heaven like him, no matter how he targeted others, it was a matter of course. At that time, if he was targeted by others, then it would be the other party who was wicked beyond redemption. Yi Shiwen's expression was cold, and he had no intention of refuting. He just kept attacking Wu Dingzi. Roar! At this moment, Wu Dingzi's body began to condense into a huge shadow. In terms of strength, it wasn't inferior to Wu Dingzi at all. It was like there was an additional Wu Dingzi. Both of them launched a counterattack at Yi Shiwen at the same time. Wu Dingzi alone was already very terrifying. Adding another one was equivalent to twice the strength. No one could stand it. Is that the incarnation of disaster from the indefinite spirit cult? Aren't there only a few people in the indefinite spirit cult who can master this magical power? Wu Dingzi actually mastered it? That's right, I've heard of this magical power. In the past, only the indefinite monarch knew this magical power. Other than the indefinite monarch, I've never heard of anyone else mastering this magical power. This time, Yi Shiwen is in trouble. Wu Dingzi alone may not be his match, but if there are two, then the situation will be reversed. At this moment, the situation of the battle became complicated and confusing in everyone's eyes. It was impossible to determine who would emerge victorious. Yi Shiwen, I'd like to see how you die now. Wu Dingzi sneered. He had never told anyone that he had successfully mastered the incarnation of disaster. This was his trump card, but now it was forced out by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen must use his blood as a sacrifice. Impermanence of heaven. Indefinite elegy. Wu Dingzi and the disaster incarnation, one on the left and one on the right, each used a peerless divine fist to bombard Yi Shiwen. In an instant, the entire world suddenly changed color. What was even more peculiar was that the two lost techniques, impermanence of heaven and indefinite elegy, which seemed to be unrelated, actually complemented each other at this moment. Their power increased by several folds. Wu Dingzi's two attacks directly set off a tidal wave of disaster, blocking all of Yi Shiwen's attacks. The 5 elements energies that Yi Shiwen had unleashed in the sky collapsed under the attack of the disaster energy. Wu Dingzi's current attack wasn't as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. It was even the effect of 1 + 1 > 2. Just when everyone thought that the situation would be reversed, Yi Shiwen just sneered. Countless sword auras condensed in his hand. The Dominator's sword aura had dominated everything since young. Its might swept across. It wasn't any weaker than the 6 paths of reincarnation fist just now. In fact, it was even stronger. After all, he had completely mastered the Dominator's sword aura. Compared to the 6 paths of reincarnation fist that he had only mastered 2 moves, it was incomparable. Boom! The sword intention in Yi Shiwen's hand spread out. The sword aura directly destroyed the tidal wave of disaster that the two bombarded. Moreover, the sword intention was still crushing. Its momentum didn't decrease, and it directly fell on the body of the incarnation of disaster. Wu Dingzi's incarnation of disaster kept struggling and roaring, but Yi Shiwen's sword intention wouldn't give him any chance. He directly collapsed into a tidal wave of energy while screaming. Puff! Wu Dingzi spat out a mouthful of blood. He was seriously injured. The incarnation of disaster could be wielded like an arm. Naturally, it was connected to his mind, and it was formed by his blood essence. Now that Yi Shiwen directly destroyed it, how could he not be injured? Wu Dingzi kept retreating. His proudest technique was actually easily broken by Yi Shiwen. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to him. In fact, he originally relied on this trump card to dominate his peers. He was very clear that his strength alone might not be able to crush his peers. However, the situation would definitely change greatly if another person joined in. However, he didn't expect Yi Shiwen to destroy it completely. There was even a hint of panic in his eyes. He was also a person who was very confident in himself, but at this moment, he had lost all confidence after being beaten by Yi Shiwen's series of techniques. This wasn't something that ordinary people could do. What are you waiting for? Wu Dingzi roared in grief and indignation. He casually tore apart the overflowing sword intention of Yi Shiwen's Dominator Sword. In an instant, before Wu Dingzi's voice faded, a monstrous stone aura descended from the sky and turned into an unparalleled sharp sword, slashing towards Yi Shiwen's head. Bang! At that critical moment, Yi Shiwen directly raised his hand to block the stone sword. Although he blocked it, at that moment, the stone aura suddenly spread out and spread towards Yi Shiwen's arm, petrifying his entire arm. Although it was only for a moment, it was forcibly expelled by Yi Shiwen's spiritual power. However, it was also at this moment that a shocking sword intention descended from the sky. It swept out with endless stone aura and directly slashed Yi Shiwen's body. Clang! After a shocking collision, Yi Shiwen's 5 elements Qian Yuan diagram flew out and protected him within it. Yi Shiwen also took advantage of this moment to throw a punch directly into the space. Bang! The space directly shattered, revealing a person in a black cloak. In his hand was a treasure sword that Yi Shiwen was very familiar with, the stone sword. Wu Ziyu! Yi Shiwen's eyes burst out. Even though the person in the black cloak didn't reveal his true face, the stone aura in the sky and the stone sword in his hand were enough for him to identify the person. Chapter 2584. Wu Ziyu. Yi Shiwen calmly spat out this name. He had already guessed the identity of this person. It should be said that this person's identity was not difficult to guess. Kiki Yi Shiwen, I didn't expect you to still remember me. The cloaked person laughed strangely, then took off his cloak. It was Wu Ziyu. Behind the cloak was a completely distorted face. Although Wu Ziyu was originally not human, he was also a genius, and he was still very handsome. But now, Wu Ziyu seemed to have been splashed with sulfuric acid. His entire face was scorched. It looked incomparably hideous. Yi Shiwen was a bit puzzled. At Wu Ziyu's level of cultivation, body regeneration was just a matter of time. It was not difficult to change into any appearance. Even if he was unwilling to change, it was not difficult to restore his original appearance. Why did he become like this? In these hundreds of years, what had happened to Wu Ziyu? Just in time, your brother saved you last time. But now, you won't be so lucky, Yi Shiwen said coldly. Previously, he let Wu Ziyu escape because he still had a grudge in his heart. It was a good opportunity to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Speaking of this, Wu Ziyu's face suddenly twitched, looking even more hideous. It seemed that he had encountered the most cruel thing to become like this. And his eyes were like a tiger and wolf, reflecting a cruel light. Yi Shiwen, do you think you can still escape today? The reason why I became like this is all thanks to you. If I don't tear you into pieces, it will be difficult to dispel the hatred in my heart. Wu Ziyu roared in a low and hoarse voice, like a wounded beast. His thoughts suddenly traversed through time and space, as if he had suddenly returned to many years ago. In order to resist and even kill Yi Shiwen, Wu Ziyu underwent the most cruel training, and even begged Wu Zimo to start the most cruel clan training. Only by suffering can one become a person above others. He also understood this truth. If he did not go through the most cruel training, how could his cultivation advance further in such a short time, let alone have the opportunity to kill Yi Shiwen? In such a long time, he had already memorized a lot of information about Yi Shiwen. This man was able to grow to this level in such a short time. He was definitely not comparable to ordinary people. But it was also because of this that he was too impatient and went berserk. The consequences of doing so were also very serious. Although he was lucky enough to survive and his cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, the price he had to pay was that he would never be able to advance again. For a peerless Heaven's Pride expert, such a result was even worse than killing him. One could imagine how much he hated Yi Shiwen. And all of this was caused by Yi Shiwen. If it weren't for Yi Shiwen, he wouldn't have been so hasty, let alone advancing by leaps and bounds. After cultivating to this level, he had already understood the heavenly way like the back of his hand. So, it was very impossible for him to have a chi deviation. This was the root cause of his current appearance. He had no reason not to hate Yi Shiwen. Naturally, he would not feel that he had provoked Yi Shiwen first. His mind had been completely twisted, and he might even have turned into a devil. He was not the devil of the devil race, but the embodiment of the darkest energy in the world. There was only one thought in his mind right now, and that was to kill Yi Shiwen. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to vent the hatred in his heart. Want to kill me? A trash like you who would go berserk while cultivating? Yi Shiwen said expressionlessly. He could easily see that the only explanation for Wu Ziyu's current appearance was a chi deviation. He didn't give him a chance to continue speaking and quietly attacked his mind. Sure enough, Wu Ziyu was completely enraged. He had become like this because of Yi Shiwen, and this Yi Shiwen actually didn't have the slightest expression of repentance. Instead, he continued to speak arrogantly. This was simply unbearable. Shua! Wu Ziyu instantly went berserk. His figure dragged out a shocking crack, and the stone sword in his hand shone brightly. It suddenly swept out and directly slashed down towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen said unhurriedly, "There's really someone rushing to die. Just nice to feed my demon-attracting banner." He blasted out a punch, and the endless fist energy twisted and turned into a six realms roulette, pressing down on Wu Ziyu. Boom! This shocking explosion set off a shocking collision. The six realms roulette directly contended with the stone sword, and they were not at a disadvantage. Although the stone energy in the stone sword was more than a little stronger compared to hundreds of years ago, Wu Ziyu's progress in these hundreds of years was indeed very shocking. If it wasn't for the fact that he would never be able to progress again after going berserk, he might really grow to Wu Zimo's level. To be able to be born from the immortal stone as a holy fetus, it was really not simple. But compared to Yi Shiwen, there was still a huge gap. Yi Shiwen didn't dodge at all. All the stone energy was twisted by the fist energy and couldn't cover Yi Shiwen's body, let alone petrify him. But although he was fine, some unlucky people, because they were too close, were swept by the stone energy and turned into a stone on the spot. They fell down and were smashed into pieces. Everyone couldn't help but take a few steps back as they sucked in a breath of cold air in their hearts. This was more intimidating than saying it 10,000 times. There was no superfluous words, but it gave them an incomparable shock. This was a god-level powerhouse who was at least on a mortal level. He could summon wind and rain in the outside world, but he couldn't even block a mere stone energy here. He was directly petrified and fell to his death. It could be said that he was the most aggrieved god in history. At that moment, everyone finally understood how terrifying Wu Ziyu was. In fact, they didn't really think much of Wu Ziyu at first. After all, he was defeated by Yi Shiwen. Moreover, he had become like this for the sake of cultivation, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Now they finally understood why Wu Ziyu had become like this. It was not because his strength was too weak, but because his opponent was Yi Shiwen. Under the situation where the stone energy was everywhere, Yi Shiwen could still steadily gain the upper hand. It didn't look like he had just fought a battle at all. Everyone could not help but raise Yi Shiwen's danger level to the extreme. Initially, some people tried to force their way through and rush over while Yi Shiwen was busy. There were even people who had the intention to kill him. They wanted to be the oriole behind the mantis, stalking the cicada, but now they all gave up on this idea. What a joke! They still wanted to live longer. They weren't tired of living yet. At the very least, Yi Shiwen was not an opponent that they could match at the moment. After Wu Ziyu was repelled by Yi Shiwen, He went completely crazy like a mad dog, desperately rushing over. He was like a person who had all his hopes destroyed by Yi Shiwen. There was only one goal left in his life, and that was to dismember Yi Shiwen into 10,000 pieces. At that moment, Wu Dingzi also joined the battle. At that moment, he was very clear that Yi Shiwen's ability was really tyrannical and terrifying. There was no way he could fight such a monster alone. However, it was different now that there was one more person. He even had some cover. Anyway, that madman Wu Ziyu hated Yi Shiwen to death. When he attacked, he did not care about the price at all. The murderous intention in his eyes was as cold as water. It directly turned into martial arts will. The disaster chi continued to expand and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. I don't believe that you can hold on for long. Even if you burn your martial arts avatar, you can't continue fighting like this. I'm going to kill you today. Heaven is unpredictable. As long as I can kill you and devour your fortuitous encounter, my skills will be guaranteed again. Wu Dingzi said coldly and instantly attacked. The two masters surrounded Yi Shiwen and launched a dazzling attack. The others could not even see it. They could only see the three fighting together like watching flowers on horseback. Yi Shiwen, when your martial arts avatar finishes burning, it will be your death. Wu Ziyu laughed grimly. His voice was very hoarse, and his laughter was as terrifying as a nightingale. What a joke. Do I need to burn my martial arts avatar to deal with you two trash? Yi Shiwen sneered and instantly made a big handprint. It turned into a sky overturning seal. The power of heaven and earth was reversed and completely under his control. It crashed down. The two of them joined forces to resist. One of them obviously could not fight against Yi Shiwen. If they did not join forces now, when would it be? Boom! Both sides were evenly matched. Yi Shiwen fought 1 against 2 and did not seem to be at a disadvantage at all. In the eyes of the crowd, it was undoubtedly a miracle. After all, these two were not ordinary late-stage sages, but the best of the best. Even some masters at the peak of the sage realm dared to challenge them. At this moment, only the people of the Confucian sect had the most confidence in him. This was because Yi Shiwen had defeated Lord Huan and killed the withered old man in front of them. Such cultivation made them very confident. Whether it was Wu Dingzi or Wu Ziyu, no matter how strong they were compared to the withered old man, there was still a big gap. Since even the withered old man was no match for Yi Shiwen, how could the two of them be a match for him? Their confidence came blindly, but it had to be said that it was very correct. Since you two trash want to see what my martial arts avatar looks like when I burn it, then I'll fulfill your wish. I'll let you understand what it means to be crushed. Yi Shiwen laughed loudly. Behind him, the sword avatar slowly appeared and then integrated into Yi Shiwen's body. Boom! In Yi Shiwen's body, countless pores were spitting out sword chi, forming a shocking explosion outside his body. His momentum was raised to a whole new level. Chapter 2585. Yi Shiwen's imposing aura was rising with every passing second. Boundless sword ki was condensing around his body. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed into an ancient sword god. The cyan robe was cold in the wind. The snow-white blade was shining with a dazzling light. The sky was even colder. Impossible. This is impossible. Wu Ziyu roared crazily. He thought that he had enough strength to deal with Yi Shiwen, so he appeared. But who would have thought that Yi Shiwen could fight 1 against 2 just now? And that was not even under the condition of burning martial arts incarnation. Just by relying on his own strength, he was able to fight against 2 of them at once. This kind of strength made his heart, which was filled with endless hatred, feel a trace of despair. Yes, it was this kind of despair. If Yi Shiwen was only ordinary strong, then he would have absolute confidence. Now, how could he say that he had the confidence to kill Yi Shiwen? His expression was extremely distorted, as if he was in pain, but also as if he was roaring, like a wounded monster. How is this possible? Not only Wu Ziyu, but even Wu Dingzi looked like he had seen a ghost. He thought that Yi Shiwen's strength had been tested to the limit. Although Yi Shiwen was strong at that level, it was not to the point of despair. But now, Yi Shiwen made him feel a little despair. This was a monster that could not be seen to the end. How strong was he? And how many trump cards had he not used? Then his expression suddenly became even more distorted. In other words, when Yi Shiwen fought him just now, he did not use his full strength at all. In other words, he was played like a monkey. He had fought for so long. In Yi Shiwen's eyes, was he just a jumping clown? Thinking of this, he was extremely angry and unwilling. He had never thought that he would be inferior to someone, and the difference was so great. His opponent was only in the middle stage of the Sage Realm. How could he be so strong? It was because he knew Yi Shiwen's realm that he was very sure that Yi Shiwen must have used some method to forcibly increase his combat strength to this level. And among these methods, burning martial arts incarnation was the most likely thing. Who would have thought that Yi Shiwen did not use his full strength at all, and did not even really refine martial arts incarnation? Thinking of this, he felt a little desperate. What a lunatic! How was he supposed to play? Could they still be good friends? Could they still have fun together? This was simply forcing him into a dead end. At this time, everyone also reacted one after another. They were dumbfounded as they looked at Yi Shiwen in the sky. It was as if the Sword Emperor had been reborn. They couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. The previous battle was already extremely terrifying in their eyes, but Yi Shiwen didn't even use his full strength, especially the people of the Confucian sect. They suddenly recalled that when Yi Shiwen had killed the withered old man, he hadn't used his martial Tao incarnation at all. In other words, Yi Shiwen hadn't used his full strength when he killed the withered old man. If that wasn't the bottom line of his true strength, then just how tyrannical was his true strength? Was he really a monster? Among the crowd, Mu Yunxi breathed a sigh of relief. She wasn't weak. She was at the early stage of the imperishable realm, but in a battle of this level, what did the imperishable realm count for? She wouldn't be of any help at all. In fact, she might even be easily petrified. She could only watch anxiously from the side. Be it Wu Ziyu or Wu Dingzi, they were all big shots who were invincible in her eyes. They weren't people she could match. With her strength, she couldn't tell how strong these people were. She could only make a rough judgment. She could only watch anxiously from the side. Yi Shiwen, do you think you're the only one with a trump card? In that short period of time, Gu Shiring finally broke open the barrier and rushed into the ruins. At that moment, the members of the Confucian sect cheered. The result was very clear. It was only a matter of time before Gu Shiring went in and collected the spring and autumn brush. This time, they won the battle. On the other side, the people of the indefinite sect were completely anxious. However, this battle in River Sun was not something they could interfere with. All the victory and defeat would be decided by the three people in the sky. Faced with the ardent expectations of so many disciples, Wu Dingzi finally decided not to hide anymore. His martial arts incarnation began to burn behind him. His martial arts incarnation was a bit like the disaster incarnation from before, but it wasn't the disaster incarnation. When this martial arts incarnation integrated into his body, the boundless spirit energy between heaven and earth began to condense and wrap around Wu Dingzi. His figure grew larger and larger until it was hundreds of feet tall. The spirit energy of heaven and earth rotated violently and condensed on his body, forming an extremely powerful disaster god. Yi Shiwen opened the eye of redemption and saw that this powerful disaster god's body was made up of countless law talismans. After Wu Dingzi burned his martial arts incarnation, he could barely activate this powerful disaster god. This should be his final trump card. In an instant, Wu Dingzi's strength increased by several times. If Yi Shiwen hadn't made a breakthrough, he might not have been able to deal with Wu Dingzi, who had suddenly increased his combat power. However, he didn't feel anything at all now. It was like watching a monkey show. On the other side, Wu Ziyu also began to transform crazily. His stone path incarnation directly fused into his body, forming a stone armor on the surface of his body. It was magnificent and the workmanship was very exquisite, but it was also very terrifying. With the enhancement of this stone armor, Wu Ziyu also became stronger and more terrifying. This was a technique that Wu Ziyu had never mastered before. Obviously, Yi Shiwen's cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds in these hundreds of years. However, Wu Ziyu didn't stay idle either. Not only did his cultivation advance greatly, but he also mastered other magical techniques. Wu Ziyu, I don't care what kind of enmity you have with him, but you have to listen to me now. Let's join forces and kill him. Otherwise, if we let him defeat us one by one, we'll really be finished. Wu Dingzi was tall, and his voice was buzzing. He could see very clearly that fighting Yi Shiwen alone would only be a dead end. However, it was a completely different story if they joined forces. However, what he hated the most now was that his supposed ally, Jun Dingtian, had not appeared yet. Unfortunately, he had no way of sensing Jun Dingtian's location. When he called for Wu Dingtian to attack just now, he was actually calling for Jun Dingtian. However, Jun Dingtian didn't appear, but Wu Ziyu did instead. This gave him a fundamental understanding of Jun Dingtian's ability to cheat his teammates. He knew that Jun Dingtian wouldn't act unless he saw a rabbit. He couldn't rely on him. If he wanted to defeat Yi Shiwen and seize the spring and autumn brush, he could only rely on himself and Wu Ziyu, who was already somewhat muddle-headed. All right, let's join forces. Although Wu Ziyu was a little muddle-headed due to hatred, he had an obsession, and that was to kill Yi Shiwen. As long as he could kill Yi Shiwen, he would do anything. Indefinite, disasterless. At this time, Wu Dingzi was the first to attack. It was another big killer move from the indefinite elegy. This was a terrifying move. If it wasn't for the burning of martial arts incarnation, he wouldn't have been able to use this secret technique. All the attacks were concentrated on Yi Shiwen. Even the disasters were forced into a line, directly rushing towards Yi Shiwen. There was no waste at all. One could imagine how terrifying Wu Dingzi's strength was. His understanding of martial arts was also extremely profound. If it wasn't for the monster Yi Shiwen, he wouldn't be afraid of anyone in the same generation. Humph. Yi Shiwen's body shook slightly, like a willow branch being blown by the wind. In an instant, dozens of shadows appeared in the sky. In the blink of an eye, it was difficult to distinguish which was real and which was fake. However, this move of unpredictable no-calamity had directly passed through a virtual shadow and hadn't hit Yi Shiwen at all. Wu Dingzi was shocked because he knew very well that this was not an illusion, nor was it an illusion, but an afterimage formed when a person's speed was at its peak. If it was an ordinary sage realm, no matter how fast they were, they wouldn't be able to create afterimages in his eyes. But Yi Shiwen did it. He didn't dare to imagine how fast Yi Shiwen's speed was. And sure enough, Yi Shiwen had already rushed over to kill. He condensed a sword intention in his hand, and with this sword intention as the center, it instantly condensed into a treasured sword. The brilliant sword power soared into the sky and pierced through the sky. It was truly an unprecedented and terrifying power. Countless law talismans covered its surface. Boom! The sword in Yi Shiwen's hand had already pierced in front of him. It was clearly condensed a moment ago, but in the next second, it attacked. Not good. What he saw was already an afterimage. In other words, what his eyes saw was actually a beat slower than Yi Shiwen's movements. This usually didn't seem like much, but in a real battle, the slightest difference could lead to a huge difference. Just a little bit of difference was enough to kill someone. He quickly raised his hand to block, controlling his body that was hundreds of feet tall like an arm. Endless disaster chi directly formed 10 boundaries in front of him. But just as his boundaries were formed, Yi Shiwen's sword had already pierced through all 10 boundaries, blasting into his body. Bang! Wu Dingzi was directly hit by the sword intent. With a scream, his entire body flew out like a kite, and a large patch of flesh and blood appeared on his chest. Puff! He finally couldn't hold it in any longer, and a mouthful of blood spurted out. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.